professor of pharmacy at Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26. Fanatic Followers. Alexis didn't go back to Hogwarts. He had to meet someone. He was there to deliver a message. The letters were stolen from Nurmengard. He had seen Grindelwald holding these letters in his arms several times and preparing to give them to him, but for some reason, he did not do so when parting. So Alexis decided to help Grindelwald. There were more than a dozen letters in total, and the envelopes were yellowed. After being in a ghost place like Nurmengard for a long time, the letter paper would become uneven, like a face burned by fire. Alexis pulled out a letter from a stack of letters and quickly followed the address to the slums, stopping in front of a courtyard with a yard of grass as tall as a person. "Is anyone home?" Alexis stood on tiptoes and shouted at the top of her lungs. Even for a tall man like him, he had to put his feet on his feet to ensure that his master could find him after his eyes passed over the grass. The courtyard was quiet and there was no echo. Alexis glanced down. The owner of this house should be named Claire. "Claire." Alexis called again. "Are you still there? I'm the messenger from Nurmengard." Before Alexis could finish his sentence, a warning sign appeared in his heart. He swallowed the rest of the sentence with a grunt and squatted down. A metallic buzzing sound flashed by, and the grass in front of him, that was as tall as a person, was cut in half, revealing a neat road. At the end of the road, there was a stooped old man with several dirty grey cloth strips hanging on his body. He was thin and had clear rib marks exposed in the gaps between the cloth strips. The old man was holding onto the wall with one hand and holding a wand in the other, breathing heavily. Obviously, the spell just now almost drained him dry. Alexis doesn't have the concept of respecting the elderly and caring for the young. What Grindelwald taught him since he was a child is that if anyone dares to draw a wand on him, he should get down first. So, Alexis also pulled out her wand and stared at the old man warily. Unless there is an emergency, a battle between strange wizards will usually be based on testing at the beginning. Each wizard has a different fighting style. Only by understanding the opponent's style and trying your best to hide your own style can you kill the enemy while avoiding your own casualties to the greatest extent. This is what Grindelwald taught him, and he always remembers it. Ministry of Magic lackey. The old man finally regained his breath. He roared, and a green light flashed from the tip of his wand. Alexis concentrated on it. At this moment, the hairs on his back stood up, and the alarm bells rang in his mind. He smelled the smell of death. The familiar feeling made Alexis' mind go blank, and he almost instinctively released a spell. Avatar. Coddler. The old man's old voice sounded, and at the same time, there was a snapping sound in the air. Alexis finally released the apparition almost when the death curse came to him. His body disappeared from the spot and appeared in a mess in the grass, where his head had been cut off. He rolled on the spot, shook the wand in his hand, and came to the old man. "Do not move." Alexis' hands and feet were cold, and she growled in a hoarse voice. His wand was pressed against the old man's chin, threatening to kill him at any moment. "Traitor." The old man did not obey Alexis' order. He was trembling and roaring, spitting in Alexis' face. "You traitors. You have betrayed the honor of wizards." He actually got along with those mudbloods. "You are a disgrace to wizards. Kill me. Come." The old man yelled, and a series of emotional roars drained his energy, causing his full emotions to drop, and he began to breathe heavily again. Alexis frowned and fished out the letter. "Are you Claire? Do you know Grindelwald? This is Grindelwald's letter to you." Claire's emotional and fancy curses stopped suddenly, like a duck being strangled by the neck. His eyes widened, and he looked at Alexis in disbelief. Then he thought of something, and his eyes suddenly turned red. Blah blah blah. The wand fell to the ground. Claire took the envelope tremblingly and wanted to open it, but due to excessive excitement, her hands no longer obeyed. Alexis stretched out his hand to help, but Claire dodged it. The old man glared at Alexis fiercely and reprimanded him in a pious and almost crazy tone. "Lord Grindelwald wrote this to me." Alexis curled her lips, still holding her wand against Claire, waiting for Claire to finish reading the letter. After countless failures, Claire finally opened the envelope, held the letter tremblingly, and read it obsessively. He was as careful as a most devout pilgrim holding a sacred object given by the gods. Alexis glanced curiously, Claire noticed, and immediately turned her back, blocking Alexis's prying eyes with her body. This annoyed Alexis. Isn't it the letter written by Grindelwald? He also taught me how to cast spells step by step. Do you have it? I even peed all over him. Have you? Snort. From the quick glance just now, Alexis judged that the letter was not long. There was only one page, and it was not full. Claire read quickly. He folded the letter carefully, put it away close to his body, turned around, and looked at Alexis with a complicated expression. I didn't expect Lord Grindelwald to have descendants. Claire murmured. Alexis had little reaction to this. Anyone who knows him, or has heard of him, knows that he is Grindelwald's adopted son. Point of course. Some people said sourly that he was just a plaything for Grindelwald to relax and relieve his loneliness after being imprisoned in Nurmengard. Later, Alexis and Black gave him a severe lesson, and the statement never appeared again. However, it is later said that the first person to say this was torn to pieces by werewolves while passing a werewolf village while traveling in Germany. What's written on it? Alexis asked curiously. Claire just shook his head without telling Alexis. He picked up a pottery bowl on the ground. In the bowl was a pile of grey paste, exuding a strange smell. Even Alexis, with all his knowledge, could not discern their true appearance. Claire took a big sip of the paste, swallowed it slowly, and then spoke. Master Alexis, it's unlucky for you to come here. I have nothing to entertain you here. Alexis nodded, unfazed. He didn't expect an old man who lived in a slum and couldn't even afford clothes to entertain him with anything good. He was just a messenger. That guy Grindelwald wanted me to help deliver the letter several times, but he was embarrassed. Alexis explained, slowly putting away the wand. Now that the letter has been delivered, it's time for me to leave. And many more. Claire stopped Alexis and caught up with Alexis with staggering steps, looking a little hesitant. Did Lord Grindelwald only write to me? There are a dozen more letters. Alexis shook his head, took out a stack of letters from his arms and shook them. Claire looked at the envelope in Alexis' hand obsessively, her head shaking back and forth as Alexis shook it, and finally she showed a look of disappointment after Alexis put the envelope away. Okay, I understand, Lord Alexis. If there is anything inconvenient in the future, you can inform me. Chapter 27, Rebellion Period. The next day, Saturday, Alexis took the Hogwarts Express back to Hogwarts. Yesterday, he was delayed due to delivering letters, so he stayed in London for another night. The next day, after visiting the Longbottoms, Alexis headed back. In the office, the teaching aids he purchased were neatly stacked, which made Alexis feel very happy. Of course, this is indispensable to Gabriel's contribution. As the prefect of Hufflepuff, he kept in mind the instructions of the pharmacy teacher Alexis. In the past few days when the teacher Alexis left, he took several students from the same school and diligently finished everything. Although they don't understand why there are so many teaching aids. After checking to make sure that the quantity was correct, Alexis moved the plants and animals used for a search into the laboratory at the back, put them in categories, and asked the house elves to help take care of them regularly. Only then did Alexis have time to pay attention to the large plants and animals on the table. Exaggerated gift box. The gift box almost occupies the entire table and is as high as an arm. The outer packaging is a festive red cloth with a slipknot tied with rope. This kind of slipknot, which Alexis learned from Huang Weijun when he traveled in the Far East, only needs to twitch a rope end, and it will open automatically. There is a letter on the gift box. Alexis looked at it briefly and saw that the letter was written to him by Huang Weijun. It probably talked about some daily business topics. Putting the letter away in the drawer, Alexis knocked on the door of the principal's office holding a huge gift box. Password: sour soda, Zizzy honey candy, woolen socks, toffee finger cake, raspberry jam, lemon ice cream, iced lemonade, butterbeer. The door opened. This made Alexis sigh in relief. Who knows which sweets the bearded old man has fallen in love with recently. There are so many sweets in the world, so he has to wait until next year. Alex, Dumbledore, who was wearing crescent glasses, was sitting behind his desk writing something. When he heard the door opening, he just raised his head and glanced, then continued to write with his head down. The principals of past generations hanging on the wall had no idea what activities or actions they were planning. They gathered together furtively and made no sound. Even when Alexis came in, they just looked back, waved, and then continued to gather together to plot. "This is a present for you." Alexis struggled to place the gift box on the floor. "Oh. Please wait, dear little Alex." Dumbledore finished writing a few strokes, put the paper into the drawer, stood up and walked over enthusiastically. "That's great. Alex, you don't know, I've been looking forward to receiving this gift, and it's finally here. Well, let's open it and take a look," Alexis urged with a stiff smile. Dumbledore nodded and moved the gift box to the table, rubbing his hands together. You could tell he seemed really excited. Even Fox, who was dozing on the side, flew over curiously and looked at the gift from Alexis. After all, the gift Alexis gave him was not even a fraction of the gift given to Grindelwald. "Smoke this one and the whole knot will unravel," Alexis directed Dumbledore as he opened the gift. Untying the rope, spreading out the red cloth, and opening the carton, the gift was exposed to Dumbledore. The entire box is divided into 5 squares. At the top of the right hand side is a light brown fedora hat with a strip of black grosgrain wrapped around it. Below are a few simple accessories. On the left is a pair of black shoes with a pair of pants underneath. Stacked in the center is a dark robe decorated with a purple crescent moon. How weird. This outfit perfectly meets Alexis' requirements. After Dumbledore opened the gift box, the smile on his face suddenly became bright. He took out his robe and looked at it carefully, grinning until his eyes went out. "Tut tut, really not bad." Dumbledore gently put the robe back into the gift box, turned around and said, "Alex, thank you for the gift. I love it." Alexis looked at Dumbledore's sincere eyes and felt a little sorry. "As long as you like it. If nothing happens, I'll go back. I have to give lessons to the little wizards soon, and I have to prepare lessons." Alexis was ready to bolt. "And many more." Dumbledore slapped Fawkes away from pecking his beard and took out a bottle of lemon juice from the drawer. "I heard that you just came back from London to buy teaching aids. Thank you for your hard work, Alex." Alexis took the lemonade and pushed open the door. "Alex!" Behind him, Dumbledore shouted. "Claire once assisted Grindelwald in causing a brutal massacre in Paris. Stay away from him." Alexis paused, turning his head. He glared angrily at Dumbledore. "I don't need your help to ask who I come into contact with." Dumbledore opened his mouth, but Alexis grabbed his attention again. "I've grown up, Dumbledore. I'm an adult. I don't need your help in making friends. Claire is great. Professor McGonagall, good afternoon." Alexis greeted Professor McGonagall, who came up stiffly and shouted gruffly, "Goodbye, Principal Dumbledore." After saying that, he left angrily. "What's going on here?" Professor McGonagall asked, confused. Dumbledore sighed and took out a report from the drawer, a ticket to be precise. It contains dense records of Alexis's illegal use of the wand outside. The latest one was in Claire's yard yesterday. Alex went to see Claire yesterday. The Claire who lives in the slums of London. I'm a little worried about him. He's too innocent. I'm afraid that he will be used by Grindelwald. Listening to the feigned conversation upstairs, Alexis snorted coldly, stepped heavily on the floor, and returned to his office. Boom. The office door was slammed hard. Horn, who buried his head in the pile of dried meat and enjoyed the food, raised his head, stared at the round eyes, glanced at the door for no apparent reason, called Aunt Alexis twice, and continued to bury his head in the pile of dried meat. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28, Because of Gryffindor. Broke up with Dumbledore on bad terms, which affected Alexis's good mood throughout the day. After browsing through magic, potions, and botany and preparing for tomorrow's class, Alexis decided to go find Hagrid. The new class schedule has been issued. He has 2 classes on Monday, namely the 3rd and 4th large classes in the morning and the 1st small class in the afternoon. The large class in the morning is for first year students, and the small class in the afternoon is for fifth year students. In fact, as the grade level increased, starting from the 4th grade, all of his elective courses became small classes, and they were held once every 2 weeks. It can be said to be compressed to the extreme. This is not consistent with the previous statement. But Alexis didn't want to go to Dumbledore. He had just finished the quarrel, and he didn't want to see that terrible old man with a sweet tooth. He was going to see how Hagrid's dragon egg was hatching. Alexis came by chance. When he arrived, Harry and Ron were also there, and judging from the atmosphere of the chat, they must have been there for a while. Harry, Ron, how was your first week? Alexis said hello, poured herself a cup of tea, and rubbed Fang's chin. Fang was a dog owned by Hagrid. It looked ferocious, but was actually very docile. There you are, Alexis. Welcome, my old friend. Hagrid greeted Alexis warmly, gave him a bear hug, and handed him a piece of rock cake. Alexis waved her hand in refusal with a stiff expression. Rock biscuits were originally supposed to be slightly hard crispy cookies, but after being processed using Hagrid's exclusive secret method, they became extremely hard and almost broke his teeth. This made Alexis wonder if Hagrid's rock cake was made of steel. I'm fine, Mr. Alexis. Harry said this, but his mood was very low. Hagrid looked at Alexis, his eyes shining. Hi. He clapped his hands and shouted excitedly, Harry, listen to me. Hagrid pointed at Alexis. Do you know who Snape's nemesis is? It's him. Alexis. If there is a nemesis for Snape, it must be Alexis. What happened? Alexis asked, confused. Hagrid looked at Harry, who was a little embarrassed and didn't speak. This is easy to understand. After all, Harry doesn't quite understand the relationship between Alexis and his father, James Potter. For Harry, Alexis is just a person who treats him very well, nothing more. Harry didn't speak, but Ron beside him couldn't help but explain for Harry. It's Professor Snape. Ron's face, illuminated by the fire, was almost as red as his hair. Oh my gosh, I've heard George and Fred say that before, but I didn't expect him to be so extreme. Then he vividly imitated Snape's appearance in potions class. Call your name, Ron said in an old-fashioned way, holding Year's pad and pretending to be on the roster. Harry Potter. Oh, yes, he whispered. Harry Potter, here's our new one, something famous. The famous savior, Mr. Potter. Ron walked up to Harry, dragged Harry's chin with his hand, and made a condescending and provocative expression. What will I get if I add narcissus root powder to wormwood infusion? What grass root powder goes into what solution? I think that's what Harry must be thinking at this time. After a pause, Ron continued his interpretation. Seeing that Harry couldn't answer, his expression changed, and he put on a sarcastic expression. TSK, TSK, it seems that fame doesn't mean everything. Then Snape, who was performing by Ron, asked Harry several questions, such as where can I find Bezoars? No answer came. Not only that, when Snape was asking questions, Hermione kept raising her hands to answer these questions, but Snape ignored them. At Harry's silence, Gryffindor was deducted 5 points. Okay, Ron, stop it. Alexis stopped Ron's performance, not because of the embarrassment on Harry's face. He walked up to Harry and knelt down, stared at Harry's green eyes seriously, and asked softly, Harry, do you also feel that Snape is really giving you a hard time? Harry hesitated for a while and finally nodded cautiously. Perhaps he was afraid that Alexis would not be satisfied with his answer, so he quietly observed Alexis's expression from the frame of his glasses in order to admit his mistake at any time. Alexis was not as furious as expected. He just sighed, stood up and gently stroked Harry's silky hair. It felt similar to James's, if James didn't apply so much hairspray. Harry, Bezoar is actually a cow's stomach stone, and scaphoid and wolfsbane are the same herb. After a slight pause, Alexis continued with some confusion. Narcissus root powder and mugwort can be mixed together to prepare a very powerful sleeping drug, which is a living hell decoction. The living hell decoction is recorded in the textbook Advanced Potion Making for Hogwarts students. After taking it, the drinker will fall into a powerful sleep state that can last indefinitely. Through Ron's explanation to Harry, Alexis suddenly discovered that Snape did not seem to be targeting Harry deliberately. If it were his class, He might also ask some basic questions, and Harry would be considered his junior, and asked Harry to answer. If he could answer it, he would definitely feel very happy. As for not being able to answer, he has always been curious about who will be the first student to stay in his office. As for the living hell potion, I don't know if it was a coincidence or if Snape really meant it. So, Harry, Alexis said sternly, Snape is not making things difficult for you, nor is he deliberately targeting you. These are basic knowledge. If you want to learn potions well, you must know them well. But, Ron obviously didn't expect that his half-day performance would be in vain. Mr. Alexis, if Professor Snape is not targeting Harry, then who is he targeting? Why did Harry have to deduct 2 of us for not answering the question? 2 points. Not 5 points. Alexis asked in surprise. The other 3 points are Neville. Harry replied quietly. Look. Alexis spread his hands. Neville deducted 3 points, and you only deducted 2 points. How can you say he is targeting you? But, even if he was targeting something, Snape wasn't targeting you. Alexis interrupted Ron's defense and said, what was that aimed at? Alexis and Hagrid looked at each other and smiled. I think it's Gryffindor. Why? Do we in Gryffindor house have any issues with him? Alexis smacked her lips and felt a little guilty when she thought about what she and James had done. No, it's not because of any fault, it's because of Gryffindor. Sir, what did you say? Harry and Ron looked confused, as did Hagrid beside them. Obviously, they didn't understand what Gryffindor was. This made Alexis quite regretful. Chapter 29. Put the dragon egg in the Forbidden Forest. The topic of Snape is targeting Harry passed like this, and the 4 of them sat around the fire and started talking about other topics. Harry listened and found it eye-opening. Alexis and Hagrid chatted mostly about the wizarding world of Guan Yu. This allowed Harry, who had lived among ordinary people since childhood and knew nothing about the wizarding world, to increase his knowledge of the wizarding world at an extremely fast speed. Harry. Ron tugged on the corner of Harry's clothes and pointed to Fang aside. Under a folded copy of the Daily Prophet revealed a few lines of text. The latest report on the break-in incident at Gringotts. The Gringotts break-in on July 31st was carried out by a male wizard. Gringottses once again emphasized that nothing was stolen. The underground vault that was searched by the intruders was completely extracted. Below is a large area of Yea's saliva. Mr. Alexis. Harry grabbed the newspaper from under Fang and held it up high. Fang thought Harry was playing with him and was grabbing Harry's knees to reach up. The Gringotts break-in happened to be my birthday. It's possible we were there when it happened, Harry said with difficulty, and then Fang threw him to the ground. Fang picked up the newspaper, held his head high, looked down at the embarrassed Harry, and wagged his tail proudly. Yes, that's right. That day, Hagrid helped Harry up, grabbed the newspaper from Fang's mouth and read it, while Alexis calmly took a sip of tea and answered. The intruder is looking for Alexis. Hagrid suddenly raised the volume to interrupt Alexis, causing the small cabin to shake so much that it seemed to begin to shake. Okay. Alexis pouted, took out his pocket watch, took a look at it, and clapped his hands. Gentlemen, it's past 7 o'clock. You should go back to the lounge. Yes, go back quickly. Be careful not to be caught by Filch and Mrs. Norris. Hagrid immediately stood up and threatened. Harry and Ron were reluctantly sent out of the hut and walked towards the castle. Hagrid. As soon as Hagrid entered the room, Alexis shouted dissatisfied. Why not let Harry know? He is too young, and we should protect him. Hagrid sat back down and hugged Fang and said. Alexis nodded. He felt that what Hagrid said made sense, but not that much. Harry had just entered school for a week, and it seemed that he should be protected, but if he was not told, it would only arouse his curiosity and make him secretly explore the truth on his own. In this way, it seems that it has failed to play a protective role. Alexis was also a little confused. I didn't know whether I should tell Harry or not. He decided not to think about it for now. Hagrid, where is the dragon egg? Hagrid jumped up from his chair in shock, leaned on the window and looked out. When he saw that no one was eavesdropping, he turned around. He lowered his voice and whispered, don't be so loud. If Dumbledore finds out, he will steal the ball. Kiu is the name I gave him. How about it? At the mention of dragon eggs, Hagrid was obviously much more excited. He proudly showed off. "I sent Kyo to the Forbidden Forest. Do you want to take a look?" Alexis didn't know what Hagrid was thinking. If a dragon egg is sent to the Forbidden Forest, doesn't it mean that it will be sent to the mouths of magical animals? It can be said that Hagrid does not cherish it, but he is willing to give up the opportunity to pick up Harry for a dragon egg, even breaking the law, privately raising fire dragons, including fire dragon eggs, without reporting to the Ministry of Magic for permission. It is illegal. Alexis gave Hagrid a dragon egg. Although it was to get a chance to pick up Harry, she didn't want to ruin the life of a fire dragon. "Come on, let's go and see." Alexis expressed concern and needed to see the dragon egg with her own eyes to feel at ease. Hagrid didn't think much about it. He picked up the oil lamp, told Yair to take care of his home, put on his coat, and was ready to take Alexis to see his ball. Alexis read several books while she waited. Raising Dragons for Recreation and Profit, Fire Dragon Species in Britain and Ireland, From Dragon Eggs to Hell, A Guide to Raising Dragons, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, The Man Who Dotes on Fire Dragons. A pile of books on raising and hatching fire dragons were piled on the bedside, many of which were still open. It seemed that Hagrid was very considerate of this dragon egg. "Okay, let's go." After Hagrid finished tinkering, he closed the door, lit the oil lamp, and led Alexis towards the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid is the warden of the Forbidden Forest. He often goes in and out of the Forbidden Forest and knows the situation on the opposite side very well. Alexis, James and the others had often been in and out of the Forbidden Forest when they were in school and were familiar with the situation on the opposite side. In fact, since the founding of Hogwarts and the emergence of the Forbidden Forest, it has been frequently visited by students. Students are prohibited from entering the mysterious Dark Forest, and the various legends about it arouse strong curiosity among students, tempting them all the time to take risks and find out. There are terrifying acromantulas, thestrals that ordinary people cannot see, timid and endangered unicorns, angry and xenophobic centaurs, werewolves, Grop, Luweni. This is simply a paradise for magical creature lovers and explorers. Countless fans of magical creatures or explorers who have walked out of Hogwarts first step into the Forbidden Forest. Walking in the dark Forbidden Forest, you can vaguely hear strange calls in the distance, but everything is quiet. Neither Alexis nor Hagrid spoke, they just walked in silence. He didn't know what Hagrid was thinking, but the familiar environment reminded Alexis of James. It was this daring guy who seduced me, who was quite well behaved at the time. Starting from skipping classes, he gradually embarked on the road of bad student. He vaguely remembered the first time he entered the Forbidden Forest with James and others. Dang 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 dang. Chapter 30. The Forbidden Forest. The sound of horse hooves interrupted Alexis's memories. Alexis thought it was the Centaur tribe who came, and he was ready to say hello to Fions, who was scolding the tribe. However, there was just a panicked sound of horse hooves passing by, but the Centaur tribe did not appear, and neither did Fions. Harry and Hagrid looked at each other and realized something was wrong in the Forbidden Forest. Fluorescent flashes. Alexis pulled out her wand, chanted a spell, and the tip of the wand lit up. He dug around in his arms and took out an oak wand that was much longer than a normal wand and handed it to Hagrid. I remember giant's wands were very long. Hagrid was startled and quickly backed away and waved his hand. "Alexis, what are you doing?" "No. Oh my god, no way." When he was a student, Hagrid was framed by Voldemort. Voldemort was still the pride of Slytherin at that time, and maybe still is, and his wand was confiscated. Since then, he has rarely had the opportunity to use magic, at least openly. The above is like this. Something might have happened, Hagrid. Alexis held up her wand and spoke quickly. "These are wands I picked up from someone else on my travels. They are not registered with the Ministry of Magic. Just give it back to me when you're done with it." Even the Centaur tribe is so panicked. There must be something wrong in the Forbidden Forest. "Hagrid, we need to separate." Hagrid was still a little hesitant. He was envious of this opportunity to use his wand to cast spells openly. At the same time, he was a little scared, fearing that Alexis would get into trouble if he did so. Alexis couldn't control that much, so she put the long wand into Hagrid's hand, raised her own wand, and chased in the opposite direction of the centaur's tribe. Hagrid stood there with a grin on his face, and continued to move forward along the same path muttering. He was more concerned about the safety of his ball than the reason for the panic of the centaur tribe. After all, the centaur tribe often panicked, and he was used to it. However, Hagrid's guess was destined to be wrong this time. Alexis soon discovered the reason for the centaur's panic. There was a large puddle of silver-white blood, and a few wisps of silver-white hair fell next to the blood. In addition to the centaur's footsteps, there were some strange marks around it. Alexis recognized them immediately. Those were unicorns. When he was a student, he went into the Forbidden Forest with James and others to hunt for treasures. Part of the startup capital for his dessert shop came from unicorns. You know, unicorn tail hair is a very expensive material, which can be used to make wands as cures and potions. In pharmacies, unicorn hairs cost up to 10 galleons each, and as far as Alexis knew, the price on the black market was only higher. Of course, unicorn blood is more expensive. If you can catch a unicorn, well, it can be exchanged for gold galleons that are 10 times the same volume. The situation in front of me now seems to be that someone went deep into the Forbidden Forest and hunted and killed a unicorn. As far as Alexis knows, there are many students who enter the Forbidden Forest, and their purposes are also different. Some are simply looking for excitement, some are to satisfy their curiosity, some are to hunt for treasures and get extra income. This was what he was doing back then, and of course, some are to suck the blood of unicorns to maintain their stability of the soul. Alexis did not move the hair on the ground. He said goodbye to the blood on the ground seriously, and then put the hat he took off back on point. He was about to wave his wand to cast the spell he was most familiar with, but halfway through, he had to change the spell. The Disapparition charm is banned throughout Hogwarts. Wingardium Leviosa. Alexis floated up and chased the centaur's tribe at extremely fast speeds over the Forbidden Forest. Maybe it wasn't obvious on the ground, but when floating in the air, the murderer's escape route was already clear. He first escaped into the Forbidden Forest, walked around in the spider territory, turned a corner, and headed towards go to Hogwarts. Alexis floated on the edge of the Forbidden Forest, looking far into the distance, silently looking at the silent empty space. Alexis. Panting, Hagrid emerged from the Forbidden Forest holding a dragon egg. He raised his head and looked at Alexis. How was it? What happened? Alexis dropped to the ground and shook her head. How about we take Kyokyo back to the hut first, and then go in and take a look. A unicorn was killed. Alexis said slowly. What? Hagrid exclaimed, nervously hugging the dragon egg in his arms, holding up his wand, and looking around alertly. The murderer has escaped. Alexis put away her wand, and came to Hagrid's side. Let's go back first. You'd better not enter the Forbidden Forest recently. Something's wrong. Alexis vaguely remembered that it seemed that this was not the time when Professor Quirrell provided Voldemort with unicorn blood. Was it because of his own appearance that the time was advanced? But I have nothing to do with any of this. Hagrid nodded and walked out of the Forbidden Forest holding the dragon egg. You take the wand first. Alexis did not accept the wand handed back by Hagrid. As the warden of the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid needed the wand even more at this time. Originally, they were happily going to see the fire dragon egg, but when the unicorn was killed, both of them felt very depressed and had no interest in continuing to talk. Before returning to the hut, Alexis was ready to say goodbye, and Hagrid had no intention of staying. He opened the door and said goodnight to Alexis. Just as Alexis was about to return, Hagrid's scream suddenly came from the wooden house behind him, causing him to stop. Chapter 31, Unicorn Hair. What's wrong? What happened? Alexis ran back to the hut, just in time to see Hagrid kneeling on the ground, holding Fang in his arms, screaming in horror. Fang was allowed to be held by Hagrid, his limbs hanging limply, his mouth slightly open, his tongue hanging out, motionless. Alexis, go get Madame Pomfrey. Seeing Alexis appear at the door, Hagrid yelled in panic, picked up Fang, and rushed out. And many more. Alexis called to Hagrid, stretched out his hand to feel around Fang's abdomen for a moment, and breathed a sigh of relief. Yeah is still alive. It was just hit by a coma spell. Ya's abdomen was warm, His heart was still beating in his chest, and the tip of his nose was moist. He was not dead, just sleeping. Alexis took Fang, placed him on the bed, and took out his wand to unspell it. Hagrid was overjoyed, and stood behind Alexis waiting with bated breath, for fear of making some noise that would affect Alexis' ability to resolve the curse. The spellcaster was very powerful, and he knew how to cast the spell very well. Apart from making Yaya fall asleep, he did not cause any harm at all. The curse stopped immediately, the sleeping spell was released, and Yaya gradually woke up. Hagrid squeezed Alexis away, hugged Fang, and repeatedly murmured words of thanks. Fang licked Hagrid's beard-covered cheek affectionately, making Hagrid laugh. Now is not the time to relax. Alexis frowned and interrupted the warm moment. He reached out and fiddled with Hagrid's thick beard, and then pulled out with a silver white hair between his 2 fingers. Hagrid, are you collecting unicorn hair? Hagrid was stunned, then let go of Fang Yap and pulled out a broken wooden box from under the bed. Opening the wooden box reveals the dense materials inside. In addition to unicorn hair, there are also feathers, snake's laughs, and scales. It can be said that almost all the materials from the animals in the Forbidden Forest can be found here. Alexis was also shocked by Hagrid's wooden box. Hey Alexis, don't be nervous. I picked these up, and I won't hurt them for these. Seeing Alexis' expression change, Hagrid quickly explained. Did you also pick up the unicorn hair? Hagrid nodded and took out a wide-mouthed glass bottle from the wooden box. Sure enough, there were dozens of scattered silver white hairs inside. There was also a bundle of hair in a cloth bag. Comparing the two, it can be clearly seen that the hair in the bag is much brighter than the hair in the jar. Alexis put the hair found in Hagrid's beard into it and compared it, and found that it was more similar to the hair in the bag. It's even better than what's in the bag. I once helped a unicorn. To thank me, they gave me a tuft of hair. This was an underage unicorn. It lost its hair for the first time, which is very memorable. Woof 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 woof. Hagrid was telling Alexis the story of hair when Tooth on the bed suddenly jumped to the ground and began to scream. As Tooth screamed, it circled around its cushion, sometimes grinning, looking very anxious. Alexis walked over to Fang and carefully lifted up the mat, revealing a patch of silver white soil. The smell of blood spread immediately. Hagrid looked blankly at the soil under the mat, then at Fang who was yelling at the stove, and finally his eyes rested on Alexis. I think your unicorn friends haven't voluntarily bled themselves to thank you, right? Alexis took a deep breath and asked calmly. Hagrid nodded, remaining dazed. So far, poor Hagrid couldn't figure out what happened. Alexis followed Yaya's instructions and came to the stove again. He lifted the kettle on the stove and put out the fire. After digging around inside, he found a piece of burnt fur. If I guess correctly, this should be unicorn fur. Alexis picked up the dark fur with a wooden stick and turned to look at Hagrid. Hagrid, have you made any enemies with anyone lately? Based on his theoretical experience, as well as the bedtime stories that Grindelwald told him as a child, based on real life stories, someone was putting the blame on Hagrid. Could it be Quirrell? Alexis tried to remember. Judging from the layout of the hut, this seemed like a premeditated frame-up, not a sudden thought at all. Quirrell was sucking the blood of unicorns in the Forbidden Forest. He should have expected to be discovered by magical animals, so his escape route was U-shaped. He first ran deep into the Forbidden Forest, and when he entered the spider territory, he would, after covering up the traces, return from the other end. But the encounter with him and Hagrid should be an unexpected emergency. In such a short period of time, did Quirrell think of this method of blaming Hagrid? Unless he has wanted to do this for a long time. Whether it was a spur-of-the-moment move or a long-planned plan, the scene had already been arranged. It was obvious that the other party could not just let it go and go to great lengths to arrange it, just to scare Hagrid. Impossible. The next step should be to call witnesses and pin the suspicion of killing the unicorn on Hagrid. Hagrid still looked confused. He still didn't understand what happened. Yaya was circling his legs, asking for comfort aggrievedly. No, Alexis, what's wrong? Alexis discarded the burnt fur, pulled out her wand, and began to clean up the traces. Hagrid, listen to me. Alexis explained while taking action. The murderer who killed the unicorn in the Forbidden Forest wants to blame you. What? Yes, the arrangement here is to put the blame on you. If my guess is correct, he should go to Dumbledore. We must clean up this place before Dumbledore arrives. Look carefully later. The murderer of the unicorn is among the people coming. Clean and new. Alexis waved her wand and began to eliminate traces. The rustling voices can already be heard outside. Hagrid, remember. After cleaning, Alexis put away her wand, came to Hagrid, and warned her seriously. You didn't kill the unicorn, and the unicorn's fur and blood never appeared here. Remember? After saying that, without waiting for Hagrid's reaction, Alexis put away her wand and opened the door with a cold face. The banquet hall is in the main building. This is a private party for Hagrid, and I'm Mr. Principal Dumbledore. Dragon egg. What to do with Kyukyu? Hagrid's exclamation came from behind. Chapter 32. Yeah. Alexis was a very naughty person when he was a child. Of course, anyone who spends his whole life lying in bed, unable to move or talk, and only able to move his eyes, would become a hyperactive naughty child if he could do it over again. The hyperactive Alexis was taught a lot by Dumbledore when he was a child, which cultivated his ability to deal with lies calmly. If it were Grindelwald, even if he demolished the earth, he would not say a word of blame. At most, he would sit in a rocking chair and watch with a smile, and maybe even add well done. Therefore, Alexis doesn't like Dumbledore, he prefers Grindelwald. Alex. Dumbledore shouted, his expression serious, but he did not continue, nor did he mean to force himself. 10 minutes ago, Dumbledore met Filch in the corridor. Filch stammered that he saw Hagrid secretly dragging an animal carcass back from the Forbidden Forest. Dumbledore didn't believe this when he asked again. Sure enough, Filch changed his story. He said he heard it. Dumbledore asked a third time, and Filch changed his story again. He said he saw Alexis and Hagrid together, sneaking around. When it came to Alexis, Dumbledore, who was originally prepared to ignore it, immediately took it seriously. Dumbledore originally planned to bring only Filch to check the situation, but when he walked to the door of the main building, a large number of people were already behind him. First, Professor McGonagall arrived in a hurry, then Sloane and Snape came hand in hand, and then Quirrell and Flitwick met unexpectedly. Even if the professors hadn't stopped him, all the teachers and students in the school would have followed. Alex. Dumbledore first called Alexis' name sternly, then he looked back at the professors behind him and asked in a low voice, "Tell me honestly, Alex, have you ever done anything against school rules?" Alexis continued to remain in the same mood as her disagreement with Dumbledore during the day. Yes. He clapped his fingers and muttered one after another, "As everyone knows, I'm a bad student of Hufflepuff, and I have brought shame to you as the principal. I skipped class, got into fights, stole dragon eggs, and broke into the Forbidden Forest. By the way, haven't you always been curious about why I got full marks in my owls and newts exams? It's because your anti-cheating test papers have loopholes. I also went into the girls' bathroom with James." Alexis was still babbling and wringing his fingers. He could no longer use his hands and had to straighten his bent fingers one by one. The professors behind Dumbledore listened dumbly as Alexis detailed his crimes. They only knew that the four Alexis were naughty when they were students, but they never knew that they were so naughty. "I also have close contact with the Dark Lord Grindelwald." Alexis finally said. "Grindelwald of Nurmengard. You should know him, Dumbledore. He is my adoptive father. He was locked up alone in a high tower in Nurmengard, surrounded by the sea. When winter comes, it is damp and cold. The sea breeze carries the salty and wet breath, making the cold man shiver. I definitely wouldn't have survived without him." At first, Alexis just didn't want Dumbledore and others to come in, so as to buy Hagrid time to get the hidden dragon egg point, but as he talked, he got really angry for some reason. "Alex." Dumbledore shouted angrily, his thick beard trembling slightly, and his cheeks on both sides twitching, which was very worrying. "Come to my office later, and we'll discuss these matters in private." He took a deep breath and said as calmly as possible, "Now, let's go in and take a look. This is Hagrid's hut, and you are not the honored guests invited by Hagrid." Alexis took a step across and stood in front of Dumbledore, refusing to give an inch. "Alexis? What's going on? What happened?" Hagrid's voice came from inside the room. Hagrid came up behind Alexis, his face stiffened, a fake smile on his face. "Ah, it's Principal Dumbledore, coming quickly." Hagrid made the invitation with mock enthusiasm. This is an honest guy who has never told a lie. His acting skills are very exaggerated, and he looks like the little fresh meat that Alexis heard about in his previous life. His words only make everyone outside the room more suspicious. Alexis had to step aside to let the professors into the room. The door opened, and Dumbledore entered the hut first, followed by Professor McGonagall, Sloane and Flitwick. The latter two cast worried glances at Alexis as they passed him. Then there's Snape. The old bat had a sullen expression as always. He paused slightly as he passed Alexis, and made an expression of looking forward to a good show. Quirrell was the last to enter. As expected, poor Professor Quirrell ended up last again. His face was pale, his body was swaying, and he still wore a turban on his head, exuding a faint disgusting smell. Yeah. For a long time, without even saying Alexis's name, the aggrieved bearer's teeth that had been surrounding Hagrid's legs suddenly became fierce and rushed towards Quirrell, scaring Professor Quirrell's face, and turned pale screamed. "Tooth. Professor Quirrell. Quickly open." Everyone was in a mess, screaming in surprise. Some people loudly reminded Quirrell, while others were about to pull out their wands and take action. It was Flitwick who reminded Quirrell, and it was Snape who was about to take action. Alexis hugged Yair's neck, bent down to hug Yair, and comforted Yair softly. Yair refused to give in, and after yelling at Quirrell twice more, he buried his head in Alexis's arms, and whimpered in grievance. I know. Good Yair. Yair is the most sensible. Yair is a good boy." Alexis comforted softly, handed the tooth back to Hagrid, stood up, and looked at Quirrell. Thank you. Yeah, Alexis, it scares me, it kills me." Quirrell stammered and patted his chest, his pale face turned red. Even now, his arms are still shaking slightly. This made Alexis very doubtful. At this level, Quirrell could really break into the Forbidden Forest, capture a unicorn, throw away the Centaur tribe, and easily cross the spider territory. He couldn't even react to draw his wand. Nothing. "Professor Quirrell, I heard that you often go to dangerous places like the Forbidden Forest or the Albanian Forest. You should be careful," Alexis said thoughtfully. "Thanks, I will." Professor Quirrell looked pale, and thanked him sincerely. Chapter 33. I was careless. No one was bitten by the teeth, and the alarm was lifted. Everyone's attention returned to the room. Logically speaking, Alexis can leave at this time. He had done everything he needed to do. They couldn't find any clues here. It was impossible to convict Hagrid. It didn't matter whether he was here or not. But Alexis chose to stay. This was the first time in many years that he was so close to Voldemort. Dumbledore and others were looking for evidence, or asking Hagrid. Despite Hagrid's poor performance, they really couldn't find anything. Alexis stared at Quirrell fiercely. He had an impulse to remove the scarf on Professor Quirrell's head, so that Voldemort would be exposed to everyone unprepared. Somehow, Alexis' hand reached towards Quirrell's scarf. What are you doing?" The moment his fingers were about to hook the scarf, Quirrell suddenly reacted. He took a few steps back, looked at Alexis with a puzzled expression, and asked stammeringly. The eyes of everyone in the room were once again focused on Alexis. It made him a little embarrassed. After reacting, Alexis coughed dryly and realized that his behavior just now was inappropriate. "Professor Quirrell, where did you buy your scarf? It's so beautiful. I want to buy one too," Alexis said, making up a random excuse. "Bought in Albania." Quirrell covered his headscarf and answered honestly. "Can you try it for me?" Alexis approached step by step, forcing Quirrell into a corner, and without any explanation, grabbed the turban. The movement here once again attracted the attention of everyone in the room. In everyone's astonishment and Dumbledore's shameful eyes, Alexis arbitrarily snatched Professor Quirrell's precious scarf. Poor Professor Quirrell looked like a little daughter-in-law who was forced by a pervert. Trembling, very helpless, Alexis took off the scarf with great determination. Now the entire British Ministry of Magic, the entire International Federation of Magic, adopts an attitude towards Voldemort by not mentioning, not recording, not reporting, not describing, as if Voldemort never existed at all, as if the Black and White War more than 10 years ago was a problem for everyone. A dream. They didn't even dare to mention the word Voldemort. Alexis wants to prove the existence of Voldemort. Not only is he not dead, he is back. However, after taking off the scarf, things didn't go as Alexis had hoped. A few heads of garlic fell out of the foul-smelling scarf, and there were several scars on Professor Quirrell's head. The back of his head was completely bare, without the noseless face. Professor Quirrell wears a foul-smelling scarf all day long. It seems that it is really just the sequel of a vampire attack. It seems that the legend among the students has been confirmed. Alex, give the scarf back to Professor Quirrell. Dumbledore looked a little ugly when he saw Alexis doing such a rude thing. He shouted loudly, came to Alexis, and grabbed the scarf. Apologized to Professor Quirrell. Alexis remained as she was, staring at Quirrell expressionlessly. Quirrell took the scarf, wrapped the garlic, wrapped it around his head again, waving his hands in a panic. It's okay, no need. Alexis said he likes my scarf. Alexis, I still have one over there. I'll give it to you when I get back. Professor Quirrell stopped stammering but no one seemed to notice. Alex, come to my office later. Dumbledore felt ashamed and hastily ended the investigation. After all, they found nothing. Giving Alexis a warning look, Dumbledore turned to discuss with Professor McGonagall and led the professors out of Hagrid's hut. I'm glad you like it. I'll wrap it up and give it to you when I get back. Professor Quirrell said sincerely. What are you doing? Snape watched Quirrell leave, crossed his arms, and came to Alexis, asking coldly. It's nothing, I was fooled. Alexis shook his head slowly and said with an ugly expression. He didn't want to start a fight with Snape, and he was in a bad mood right now. He was afraid of starting a fight with Snape. In a fight in a place like Hogwarts where apparition is prohibited, it is still unknown whether he can defeat Snape without his mobility advantage. Once a fight started and he lost, he would be depressed to death. Grindelwald taught him, if you are not sure about killing your opponent, choose to do it when you are sure. Is there something wrong with Quirrell? Snape followed Alexis' gaze and stared at Quirrell's back, watching him disappear into the night, and asked aloud. Alexis shook her head, not wanting to speak. Snape snorted, tossed his robes, and floated away. Alexis and Hagrid were the only ones left in the room. Hagrid sat down on the bed and kept wiping his sweat. This was the first time he had lied in front of so many people. He's really not good at lying. Ye ran to Hagrid obediently and comforted this honest and enthusiastic big man. I go first. Alexis also said goodbye and left. Back in the office, Alexis sat behind her desk, deep in thought. He found that he had underestimated his opponent. The stories I heard in my previous life were just stories after all. They were just children's fairy tales, not reality. Now, he was living in reality, not a story. Whether it's Voldemort, Quirrell, or even Lockhart and Umbridge in the back, they are all living people. They have ideas, and will change according to the actual situation. They are not immutable puppets who stupidly follow the development of the plot. Today is a good lesson. Quirrell must have discovered Alexis after he was discovered, so he took advantage of the situation and arranged Hagrid's hut as a crime scene to frame Hagrid. Then spread the rumor and let Dumbledore know through others. Once it involves him, no matter how ridiculous it is, Dumbledore will go and check to make sure that he is not causing trouble. As for Quirrell, he had separated Voldemort from his body long ago. In this way, even if he took off his scarf in public, Voldemort would not be discovered. After the whole thing came down, even if the frame-up failed, he still cleaned himself up inside and out, proving his innocence with his own hands. After all, this was in front of Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Sloane, Snape, Flitwick, and even Hagrid. It proved that there was no other face behind his head. As long as he acts carefully in the future, no one will suspect him. Chapter 34, Class. The next day, Sunday, the failure to win Quirrell in one go made Alexis a little frustrated, but more importantly, it made him wake up and realize that this was not a fairy tale, and what he was facing was a real person. Alexis was honest on Sunday. He didn't hang around or cause trouble. He stayed in his office and did research all day. This made Dumbledore, who was observing quietly, relax. It looked like Alexis' behavior last night was just intermittent convulsions. However, only Quirrell and Alexis knew that Alexis was more wary of Quirrell. He had been watching Quirrell all day. The peaceful Sunday passed quickly, and the next day was Monday. The weather on Monday was not very good, and it was a bit gloomy. When the students had breakfast and started classes, it even started to rain. Alexis's pharmacy elective class starts at 10 o'clock, and the first class is for 3rd grade students. Almost all the stairs in the main building of Hogwarts have changed. If you want to remember these changes, you can find the way to the next classroom in just 10 minutes between classes. For first year students who have just arrived for a week, said it was a severe test. Not to mention freshmen, even many upperclassmen often take the wrong path. Fortunately, Alexis had spent 7 years at Hogwarts and knew the place well enough. When he walked into the classroom, there were only a few people sitting in the potions classroom. Alexis ignored the whispers of the students below. He took out the roster and browsed it briefly, nodding with satisfaction. This class was for the 3rd grade. There were a total of 20 students from Slytherin, Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, and the number of students from his hometown Hufflepuff reached a terrifying 33. This is almost the entire number of people in Hufflepuff's entire 3rd year. Alexis didn't know whether it was organized by the little badgers on their own or under the instruction of the dean. Either way, he was very moved. Students entered the classroom one after another and were still talking and laughing loudly in the corridor. After entering the classroom and seeing Alexis standing in front of them, the students stuck out their tongues, lowered their voices, quickly found their seats, and behaved obediently. Sit down. Take out a book to block Alexis' view, and communicate in a low voice below. The whole classroom immediately became buzzing, as if facing millions of flies. Students entered the classroom one after another and the empty seats were quickly filled. Alexis glanced around and counted silently 53 people. Just right. Clap clap. Alexis clapped his hands, and the whole classroom fell silent. The students raised their heads and looked at Alexis in front of them. My name is Alexis Felix. Alexis glanced around the classroom and introduced himself with a smile. You can call me Alexis or Mr. Felix, whatever. You are 3rd year students, so I don't need to emphasize classroom discipline. I hope we can spend a pleasant 2 hours together. Okay, let's start class. Alexis smiled slightly, walked back to the podium, listened to the sound of turning books below, and asked aloud, do you know anything about plant taxonomy in the Muggle world? The little wizard stopped what they were doing and looked at Alexis. Do you know? This question is worth 1 point. There was silence in the classroom. 3 points. Little wizards, you look at me, and I look at you, a little moved. 5 points. Alexis ups the score again. There was a slight noise in the classroom, and the little wizards couldn't help but discuss in low voices. Alexis did not maintain classroom discipline, but quietly waited for the results of the students' discussion. Soon, the classroom became quiet again, and everyone looked at Alexis again. It seems that no one knows. Alexis was a little disappointed. The Muggle world roughly divides plants into ferns, mosses, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. According to their different classifications, they are further divided into 6 levels, namely phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, systematically covering all plants. Plants under the same level and genus have the same characteristics, so that whenever we encounter a newly discovered plant, we can quickly incorporate it into this mature system, based on its characteristics. This kind of division will allow people to understand a strange plant in a very short time. Do you know cabbage, but don't you know mustard and cabbage? It doesn't matter. Through observation, we can find that they are all Brassicaceae. Yes, open page 43 of the first textbook. The 3 flowers drawn above are cabbage, mustard and cabbage. As Alexis narrated, the little wizards below silently opened the first textbook and turned to page 43.3. Similar but different flowers appear before your eyes. We know that cabbage is edible, so cabbage and mustard greens, which both belong to the cruciferous family, are most likely edible. Perhaps the first person to discover that mustard greens and cabbage are edible just saw that their flowers are similar to cabbage. Alexis made a little joke, but no one dared to laugh. 2 days ago, it was rumored that Alexis and Hagrid conspired to enter the Forbidden Forest and killed a unicorn. This was a terrible act for the students, although nothing happened in the end, and there was no news to confirm the accuracy of the rumors. The students did see Dumbledore taking people to Hagrid's hut. Before they could figure out whether Alexis was a amiable gentleman or an evil dark wizard with a human face and a beast's heart, they always behaved very reservedly in front of Alexis. Look, our ancestors used this simple and efficient induction method to help us explore and understand the world. Alexis didn't care what the students were thinking. He only knew that, since he was standing here, he should teach the class well. The Muggle world has inherited this aspect of our ancestors very well, and further summarized this method into a system, but the wizarding world has done a very bad job on this point. At this point, Alexis paused slightly. Sure enough, the little Slytherin couldn't help it. Teacher Felix. A Slytherin raised his right hand. Any questions? With a smile on her face, Alexis stretched out her hand to ask the student. That's because Muggles are just Muggles. They don't have charms, so they can only rack their brains to think of opportunistic ways. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35. Continue class. If they had magic, they wouldn't come up with such ridiculous methods. Slytherin sneered, then shrugged and apologized without sincerity. Sorry, Mr. Alexis, I didn't mean to talk about you again. Alexis slowly put away her smile, walked up to Slytherin, and looked at him. The classroom became extremely quiet, and the little wizards all stared at the Slytherin with his head held high in disbelief. They probably thought he was crazy. Not even the bravest Gryffindor would do this if he rashly provokes the teacher in class. Alexis glanced at the Slytherin emblem on his chest and was not in a hurry to fight back. He turned and scanned the classroom. Asked softly, do you think so too? In the relatively spacious pharmacy classroom, no one made a sound. All the little wizards who met Alexis lowered their heads and prayed silently in their hearts. Can't see me, can't see me, can't see me. Seeing this, a trace of disappointment flashed in Alexis's eyes. He turned back to the podium and tapped the table gently. I hope you can learn something in my class. If you come to my class just to get credits, I will be very disappointed. So, before class, it seems necessary to discuss with you, in the world of Muggles and wizards, who is truly backward? Only by discussing this issue clearly will you be able to face up to this subject that was born out of Muggle botany and learn something a little different. Alexis spoke very quickly, without giving the little wizards time to react. He directly asked the first question. Does anyone know what the most commonly used spells are in wizard duels? I know. The one who spoke was the weird Lightwind brother, and Alexis couldn't tell whether it was George or Fred. It's a disarming spell. Alexis nodded. Yes, it's a disarming curse. According to incomplete statistics, in almost every duel, the disarming curse will appear at least twice. And often, when the disarming curse appears, the party that is hit will lose the duel. So, does anyone know why? Will you lose if you are hit by a disarming spell? Because the disarming charm will cause the wand to fly out of the opponent's control. The opponent cannot use the spell. Next to the twins, a Gryffindor student answered. Yes. Alexis nodded appreciatively. To a wizard, the wand is a weapon. If you lose the weapon, you will naturally lose in the duel. Perhaps we can put it another way. To the wizard, the wand is a common tool that is handy. In fact, there is a kind of magic called wandless magic. Wizards use wands to guide magic, so the effects of spells can be more accurate and effective. Only powerful and highly skilled wizards can stably master difficult wandless magic. Spells are usually difficult to cast without the use of a wand. Therefore, the wand is a very handy tool for wizards. A wizard who loses his wand is no different from an ordinary person. So, if a normal person dueled a wizard, who would win? Wizard. Of course a wizard. How can an ordinary person defeat a wizard? The little wizards chirped in reply, with relaxed smiles and pride on their faces. Alexis went on to ask, what about a wizard holding a wand and an ordinary person holding a sword? Wizard how? It should be a wizard. Of course a wizard. After a brief internal commotion, the little wizards once again answered unanimously that they thought the wizard would win. What about a wizard holding a wand and an ordinary person holding a gun? This time, the little wizards argued for a long time, and finally several little wizards with loud voices shouted the answer: the wizards will win. Alexis was non-committal, continued to smile, and asked further, what if there is a wizard holding a wand and an ordinary person driving a tank? What if this ordinary person controls a cannon or a rocket? What if it is an atomic bomb? Or a more powerful thermal weapon? Who will win? By this point, the little wizards were in complete chaos. Some little wizards think that ordinary people will win, and some little wizards insist that wizards will win, but most of the little wizards think that such a comparison is unfair. Mr. Alexis, a Hufflepuff student, stood up and said sincerely and seriously, such a duel is unfair. Where is it unfair? This little boy wanted to say that extra tools cannot be used in a duel, such as tanks, airplanes, and cannons. These are obviously over-the-range tools, but thinking of Alexis's analogy before, that a wand is just a tool to a wizard, he couldn't say this. The little boy hesitated for a long time. He felt that something was wrong, but for a while he couldn't tell what was wrong. Alexis waved her hand and motioned for him to sit down. I know that, although you can't tell what's wrong, you all feel that this comparison is unfair. Obviously wizards only hold magic wands, but ordinary people have aircraft and cannons. That is to say, Alexis paused and then said, do you think aircraft cannons are more powerful tools than magic wands? Or do you think that aircraft and artillery should not be compared? The little wizards did not rush to answer. They were not fools. They thought about the two explanations given by Alexis. No matter which choice they chose, they would eventually deduce a result. Wizards are essentially no different from ordinary people. Difference. This somewhat subverts the young wizards' views. They always feel something is wrong. Do you feel that something is not right? Are you dissatisfied and can't express your feelings? Alexis simply spoke out for them. That's because when you think about wizards and ordinary people, you have already assumed that the wand and the wizard are one. You have not thought about it. The wand is actually a foreign object and a tool. Just like swords, guns, airplanes and cannons, it is just a tool. In fact, even if it is an ordinary person holding a gun, if he is not a highly skilled wizard, there is a high probability that the wizard will lose. To fire a firearm, you only need to tap the trigger lightly. From making up your mind to fire the bullet to reacting with your finger and pulling the trigger, the entire process may only take 0.2 seconds at the shortest. And what is the fastest magic spell? Disarm you? It will take you at least 0.5 seconds to finish pronouncing this word. Coupled with the gestures of casting spells and aiming, it will take more than 1 second for even the most skilled wizard. Even if the time required for both is the same, if two people fire it at the same time, if the spell fails to hit the person, the spell will be ineffective, and the wizard can only prepare the second spell. Firearms don't. Even if you don't hit a vital point, just hitting the body will cause damage. The unbearable pain will make your spells deformed, and the spells will become non-standard. Over time, wizards who have lost too much blood will fall into unconsciousness, and then it's also impossible to aim. Ordinary people even only need to hit the wizard, and then dodge the spell. It only takes time to kill the wizard, not to mention weapons of mass, widespread destruction. Do you still think the wizard will win now? Chapter 36, a course that subverts the three views. Now let's think about when firearms were invented. Alexis faced the little wizards who were deep in thought and did not let them go easily. He planned to destroy the little wizards' inexplicable sense of superiority in one go. The earliest record of firearms was invented by people from a country called Song Dynasty in the Far East. It has a history of more than 800 years. In other words, that is, wizards are actually stagnant in human society more than 800 years ago. Whoa. Once this conclusion came out, the little wizards could no longer remain calm. They could not accept that wizards, who had always had a superior status, were more than 800 years behind muggles. This is something they absolutely cannot accept. Quiet. Alexis knocked on the table calmly, raising her voice slightly to suppress the commotion below. More than 800 years ago, maybe more than 800 years ago, before firearms were invented, wizards were on par with humans, or even more advanced than humans. But it has been 800 years since firearms were invented. What is there in the wizarding world? In more than 800 years, firearms have developed from ridiculous and clumsy muskets to machine guns, sniper rifles, automatic rifles, and then to artillery, bombs, missiles, and even atomic bombs. If one atomic bomb is dropped, it will be the defense of Hogwarts. It may not be possible to stop it. But what about the wizarding world? There seems to be nothing in the wizarding world, except various refined spells. Wizards still wave their wands, and engage in ancient one-on-one melee combat. Even ordinary people who are well trained and agile are only needed. You can also avoid the wizard spell. After all, no matter how powerful the spell is, it is of no use, as long as it cannot hit the target. The Muggle world has a kind of precision guidance technology, and tracking and positioning technology, which can allow the launched ammunition to hit the target accurately. It is similar to lock-in tracking, and the magic spell in the wizarding world. After Alexis said this, she finally stopped. He glanced around the classroom, and saw that the little wizards were as wilted and listless as eggplants beaten by frost, and sighed secretly in his heart. Although he was raised by Grindelwald since he was a child, and although it seems that Grindelwald's philosophy is that wizards are supreme and looks down on muggles, even in the eyes of outsiders, Grindelwald is an extreme wizardist. He despises and even despises muggles melon. But only those who truly understand him and have been exposed to his thoughts know that Grindelwald attaches great importance to muggles, especially the development of muggles in technology and force. Part of what Alexis said came from the memories of his previous life, and part of it came from what Grindelwald had been exposed to since he was a child. As a wizard, this is his identity and position that he cannot change, but seeing wizards immersed in the glory of their ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago, and unable to extricate themselves, they clearly lagged behind ordinary people in all aspects, but they still proudly call them advanced. Ordinary people are muggles. Oh, and there are even more unpleasant mudbloods. It seems that muggles are already wizards who are self-effacing towards ordinary people. This really made Alexis sick. Mr. Alexis. The little Hufflepuff boy raised his hand and looked at Alexis helplessly. Are we really that far behind the muggles? The kid seemed to be shaken to the point of losing his confidence. What's your name? Alexis asked. Cedric Diggory. The little boy replied disappointedly. Cedric, that's not what happened. Hearing what Alexis said, a group of wilted eggplants looked at Alexis with bright eyes and full of hope, hoping that he could say something to help the wizard win the battle. But they were destined to be disappointed. The wizarding world may have many shortcomings and backwardness, but we can learn from it. As long as we correct our mentality, humbly absorb nutrients from ordinary people, and learn from their advanced and good sides, the wizarding world will also become very good. Alexis tapped the textbook on the desk. This book was written after I traveled around the world and learned more about botany. I hope that you will not only get 2 credits in my class, but also not only learn new pharmacy knowledge. More than these, I hope that you can learn the bias of bloodletting, be good at discovering advantages, and learn this kind of thinking and learning methods. Not limited to pharmacy. Cedric nodded in understanding, still a little depressed, but he quickly adjusted his mood, raised his face, and said solemnly, Mr. Alexis, thank you. Although I don't quite understand what you said, I will try my best. Alexis smiled encouragingly and clapped her hands, allowing the little wizards to focus their attention again. Okay, I think after the discussion just now, everyone should be able to take this course seriously. Now let's officially start the class. In the first class, after discovering that there was a problem with the consciousness of the little wizards, Alexis adjusted the content in time and finally finished the class with great difficulty. After watching the students leave, Alexis returned to his office and pondered. This class is for 3rd graders, and if this is true for 3rd graders, what about 4th, 5th, 6th, and even 7th graders? They have experienced a systematic wizarding education. They have been detected as having the physical constitution to become wizards since childhood. They are the 1 in 10,000. They have had a sense of superiority since they were young. 1 in 10,000. The one who is different has a sense of superiority point after 7 years of training. Can this kind of thinking still be corrected? Alexis looked through the roster, and it was bad. Except for Hufflepuff, no one in the 7th grade chose this course at all. Even the most open-minded Hufflepuff, there were only 2 people. There are slightly more 6th grade students, and there are only 6 people in the 4 colleges combined. 13 people in 5th grade. It can be seen from the number of people taking elective courses that the senior students have a serious sense of superiority and pride in being wizards. Chapter 37. The first lesson of grade 1. Before class, Alexis didn't think so much about it, but when the little Slytherin guy asked the question, he suddenly realized the problem. Between the wizarding world and the muggle world, who is advanced and who is lagging behind? This question is really hard to answer. Is the wizarding world really more than 800 years behind the muggle world, as Alexis said? This is obviously nonsense. But the wizarding world has always been complacent because of its inexplicable sense of superiority. This is an indisputable fact. Social development is like sailing against the current. If we don't advance, we will retreat. As time goes by, more and more problems begin to be exposed, but the management of the wizarding world does not seem to want to change. They feel that it is fine now. Mixed blood and even muggle wizards have poor foundations and weak connections. They either want to change, but are unable to do so, or they just sink and choose to join. Pure blood families are aloof and conservative, and many pure blood families even do not hesitate to marry close relatives in order to maintain the purity of their bloodlines. It's like they have a national jade seal in their family that needs to be passed down, for fear that the blood of outsiders will be divided. The entire wizarding world is filled with a rotten and old atmosphere, lifeless and lifeless. Not to mention that the noseless bald guy came up with such a pure blood supremacy formula more than 10 years ago, and even now, many people still believe in it crazily. Alexis had no doubt that, as long as the bald man stood up and raised his arms, at least half of the senior officials in the Ministry of Magic would respond. The theory of blood and persecution of one's own people is far worse than Grindelwald's theory of ethnicity. At least Grindelwald sees the problems in the wizarding world, which is beneficial to the wizarding world as a whole. Alexis sat on the chair, thinking about this in a divergent manner. He felt a little headache. These questions seemed like things he shouldn't be thinking about. What propositions, what program, and what are the main contents of the central idea? Shouldn't these be what Grindelwald, Dumbledore, or the bald guy, or even worse, people like Fudge should think about? What is he worrying about here? Everyone jokingly calls him the 3rd generation Dark Lord. Does he really think he is the 3rd generation Dark Lord? Even if the current generation of Dark Lords is lying on the island basking in the sun, drinking tea, and living the life of an elderly person, and the 2nd generation of Dark Lords is preparing for estration, it is not his turn as the missing 3rd generation of Dark Lords to take the lead. Alexis shook her head to get rid of the messy thoughts in her mind. It's too far to think about this now. This should be what Dumbledore and Grindelwald should worry about if they want to form a black and white evil duo and debut again. Thinking of this, Alexis put a bookmark on the 3rd volume of Magic, Potions, and Botany, took notes, opened the 1st volume, and started reviewing. After going over what he was going to say, Alexis simply ate some lunch and lay down in the office to rest. In the afternoon, Alexis woke up on time and walked into the classroom with lesson plans and textbooks under her arm. There are no more students in 1st grade than in 3rd grade. According to the roster, there are 50 students in total. In fact, this is already a lot. After all, judging from the course introduction, this is a course born out of muggles. Those who can enter Hogwarts are all wizards selected from a million, and they naturally carry a sense of pride. If it weren't for the Hogwarts regulations that prohibited 1st year students from taking other elective courses except potion, there would have been even fewer pharmacy students. The 1st graders came to the classroom early and sat down. When Alexis entered the classroom, everyone was already dead. He nodded slightly to Hermione, Harry, and Ron sitting in the front row, put the lesson plan on the desk, spread out the textbook, and started class. After briefly introducing himself, Alexis opened the catalog. The 1st volume of Magic, Potions, and Botany is very simple. It is more like a reference book. It introduces the classification and origin of botany, lists various common plants, and organizes them according to botanical classification. Classification point. There are even pictures of various plants on it. Point looks more like a children's book than a textbook. But the first year students didn't dare to be careless. They had just been at Hogwarts for a week. They were cautious and curious about everything, and carefully learned about the strange magical world. Although they were proud, the person standing in front of them was an adult wizard and their teacher. This strange combination of humility in the face of authority and pride in being a wizard gave the young wizards an attitude towards this course that was no different from the compulsory courses. They sat upright, paying full attention, with their arms placed obediently on the table, their heads held high, and their eyes brightly staring at Alexis, listening to his lecture. Teaching first grade students was much easier. Alexis successfully introduced the methods and origins of botanical classification without any students raising questions or any provocation from the little snake. The little wizards listened quietly and took notes seriously. Even Gryffindors, who loved making trouble, no one made any mistakes. Alexis didn't know that apart from the fact that they were new students, part of the reason for this was that the little wizards heard that he and Hagrid secretly entered the Forbidden Forest and ate a unicorn. It is said that the meat of unicorns is of good quality, and both Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall, who came to question the crime, were bought by the delicious unicorn meat. Yes, that's right. The rumors about Saturday night had completely changed by the time they reached the freshman class. It has been completely separated from the matter itself and turned into a private barbecue festival among teachers. This is the classification method and origin of botany. Do you have any questions? Alexis paused the process and asked. It was quiet below, and the little wizards looked at him with wide eyes, curiosity, and fear in their eyes. Fear? What is this ghost? Alexis muttered to herself. Miss Granger. Hermione raised her little hands high. Her curly hair was messy, and she looked dirty and cute. Hermione stood up. She was not in the mood for gossip. Ever since she entered Hogwarts, she had been focused on her textbooks. She cherishes every class. Sir, what you are talking about seems to come from the knowledge of the Muggle world. Hermione's parents were ordinary dentists, not wizards. The word Muggle was still a bit unfamiliar and strangely awkward to Hermione. Chapter 38, Malfoy with a rebellious spirit. Yes, that's right. Alexis nodded. This method of classifying botany is very complete and efficient. I think it is a mature system that has been tested. Hermione looked confused. Mr. Alexis, does it also work with potions ingredients? Sir, I read the following content. It seems that you have completely integrated the entire potion science into your system. If this is feasible, why do we have to take 2 courses? Alexis was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled slightly and said, Miss Granger, I think you should ask Principal Dumbledore or Professor Snape this question. Hermione still doesn't know the relationship between Alexis and Dumbledore, let alone the many twists and turns of love and hate between him and Snape. In fact, most students don't know. Only a few summer perclassmen have heard a thing or two about it. Therefore, Hermione did not understand the ridicule in Alexis's statement. But she is a good and realistic girl, and she has a persistence in asking questions that she does not understand. You don't know either? Hermione was a little disappointed. Okay, Miss Granger, this is a matter outside of class. Perhaps we can discuss it privately. If you wish, my office door is always open for you. Other students, do you have any questions? Almost as soon as Alexis finished speaking, an arm was raised high again. Draco Malfoy. Alexis was a little surprised. What questions do you have? The great Master Malfoy stood up proudly, combing his platinum blonde hair back, revealing his bald forehead. Mr. Alexis, if plants can do it, can magical animals also have such a division method? Alexis' eyes lit up. She didn't expect Master Malfoy to ask such a quality question. Isn't this the topic he has been working on recently? Of course. Alexis nodded with satisfaction. But I'm still verifying the classification of animals. This is a task that requires patience. Malfoy nodded and continued to ask, Sir, have you verified the unicorn? As soon as a unicorn appeared, there was a slight commotion below for the first time since class started. Does unicorn also fit into your classification? How should it be classified? Have you figured it out? Master Malfoy asked with a teasing smile. There began to be more commotion in the classroom, and some students couldn't help laughing. Harry and Ron turned their heads and glared at Malfoy. As for the good girl Hermione, she looked confused and didn't understand what was going on. What's so funny? In her opinion, isn't this a good question worth exploring in depth? Maybe they can capture the unicorn and study it carefully if there is no result in the end. She even had some thoughts about adopting Malfoy because of this problem. It turns out that Malfoy is not just a bully, he is also very good at learning. Alexis's eyes darkened slightly, then he smiled softly and said, Draco Malfoy, how do you think unicorns should be classified? He walked down the podium step by step and came to Malfoy's side. His eyes were always full of smiles, but as he approached step by step, Malfoy couldn't help but tremble. Malfoy forced himself to calm down. It's alright. Father has already explained that he is just an ordinary wizard. That time in Diagon Alley, my father just didn't want to break the gentleman's etiquette and attacked him in public. Malfoy cheered himself up silently in his mind. Wrong answer. Malfoy just started, but Alexis immediately interrupted. Slytherin will deduct 1 point. TSK Alexis tsked, showing a look of regret, and glanced at the student who had just laughed out loud. I think this gentleman should know the answer. Come on, tell Malfoy how to classify unicorns. The person who was called was Malfoy's follower. After being called, he stood up and hesitated for a long time. His face turned red from holding back. I do not know, he whispered. What a pity. Slytherin has been deducted another point. Alexis made a sound of regret without sincerity and continued to point at the Slytherin students. Soon, the Slytherin students were called on again, but no one answered. There were a total of 17 Slytherins who came to class. With just one question, in less than 10 minutes, Alexis frantically deducted 17 points from the Slytherins. After the last Slytherin was announced to be deducted points, the atmosphere in the entire classroom became solemn, and Malfoy, who had caused the trouble, was about to cry. He couldn't imagine what he would face if his prefects or even Professor Snape found out about this. Alexis shook her head and sighed falsely, returning to the podium. So, can anyone try to classify unicorns according to the method I just mentioned? This is actually a super category question. Even Alexis has not yet finished sorting out the classification of zoology after including magical animals. But this question is not difficult. As long as you have a little common sense and follow the botanical classification he just talked about, you can still get a rough idea. Well, it requires a bit of common sense in the Muggle world. There are no categories in the wizarding world. Miss Granger, maybe you could try. Alexis glanced at Harry, who was so frightened that he quickly shrank his neck and thought silently, can't see me, can't see me, can't see me. Hermione stood up and hesitated for a moment. Whispered, sir, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Let's start with the door. Usually animals are divided into vertebrates and invertebrates. Think about it. Which one does a horse belong to? Vertebrates? Hermione asked tentatively. Yes. Alexis encouraged. It belongs to the phylum Chordata. So is it a mammal or an oviparous animal? Mammal. Yes. So, it is Mammalia. Now let's divide the order. Animals are slightly different from plants. They are divided into Perissodactyla and Archaeodactyla according to the number of toes. It's Perissodactyl. Ron on the side shouted excitedly, I've seen pictures of unicorns. It's like a horse, with only one toe. Hermione rolled her eyes at her friend with dissatisfaction and replied seriously, Pissima, sir. Now let's divide the subjects. What Ron said just now is right. The unicorn is like a horse to a certain extent, so it should be divided into Marco. Hermione and several classmates around her followed suit. So smart. Alexis complimented and continued to guide. Then there is a genus. According to what I said before, some family levels and genus levels will share the same name, but unicorns and horses are not exactly the same. Maybe we can list a separate genus for it. So, unicorn belong, unicornus. More students began to answer naturally. So smart. So, the classification of unicorn should be Chordata, Mammalia, Perissodactyla, Equus, Unicorn, Unicorn. How smart. Alexis praised, except Slytherin. 5 points for each of the other 3 houses. Chapter 39. After school exercises are here. Today in class, we talked about the classification methods of botany, as well as the origin and development of classification methods. Seeing that there was not much time, Alexis began to summarize. We also tentatively classified unicorns scientifically. During this period, classmate Draco Malfoy mentioned the doubts about the classification of the animal kingdom. Unfortunately, he did not answer. For this, Slytherin paid the price of 17 points. Miss Granger brought up the correlation between the two courses of potions and pharmacy. I haven't answered this question yet. I think maybe you can go down and think for yourself, and then turn the results into a report and hand it in. When it comes to homework, the little wizards who were so excited just now, because they personally participated in classifying unicorns, immediately started to wail. Send the report to my office before 9 o'clock this Friday night and I will check it. Since they were not yet familiar with the Hogwarts teaching model, Alexis extended the original deadline to next week. He has 2 classes for each grade, which should add up to 14 classes a week. However, in view of the actual number of people who signed up for the class and the exam pressure of senior students, the class schedule was adjusted at the end point. After the adjustment, he only has 8 classes a week, and if all of them are counted as large classes, there are only 7 classes. There were 2 classes on Monday, which was not a big pressure for Alexis. Although there were some minor twists and turns, overall he was still going in the direction he expected. After returning from the classroom and resting for a while, Alexis walked towards Hagrid's cabin. He arrived by chance. There was no one in the cabin. Only Yale looked pitifully at him through the window, whimpering from time to time. Just when Alexis couldn't help but use Aho cave to break in, a tall and slovenly figure emerged from the edge of the forbidden forest not far away. "Hi, Alexis." Hagrid recognized Alexis from afar, raised his hand and waved, and ran over quickly. "Why are you here?" Hagrid asked as he opened the door and invited Alexis into the room. "Isn't today your first day of class? How is it? Is it going well?" The door opened, and Ye ran over happily, first circling Hagrid, and then came to Alexis, whimpering while circling, not knowing what to express. "It's okay. Some Slytherin guys are a little arrogant." Alexis smiled. "But you know, Hagrid, I'm the best at dealing with Slytherins." Hagrid thought about more than 10 years ago, when those troublemakers used an upside-down golden clock to hang Severus Snape on a tree and humiliate him by taking off his pants. If Lily hadn't arrived with him, Severus Snape would have died. Snape has committed suicide in shame and anger. Well, he's really good at dealing with Slytherin. "What happened? I see you came out of the Forbidden Forest." Alexis asked. He noticed that Hagrid's body was stained with a lot of dirt and grass clippings, and his flappy beard had turned a dull grey. There are also a few leaves mixed in. Hagrid nodded, stroked his beard nonchalantly, and made the chair creak as he sat down. "I'm going to put the ball away. By the way, find Fines and the unicorns to find out the situation." When it came to Kiu, Ye got a little intense and even barked twice at Hagrid. Hagrid hugged Fangya and explained to Alexis helplessly, regardless of Fangya struggling hard. "I don't know what happened." Ye stayed with Kiu for a whole day, and he actually thought Kiu was his child. "When I took Kiu away this morning, Ye kept biting my pants and almost gave me a break. I chewed it up." Ye heard Kiu's name again. She poked her head out from the gap sadly, raised her head and called out. Then she withdrew from Hagrid's arms. She returned to the mat and lay down on the mat in despair, pointing her butt towards the sea grid. Alexis smiled and shook her head, stroking 2 handfuls of Fang's smooth fur as a comfort to Fang, who had lost her beloved son, and then turned to look at Hagrid. "Any gains?" Hagrid shook his head. Firen said they were just passing by and the noise scared away the murderer. Several centaurs thought it was a werewolf or a vampire. They said that only werewolves and vampires could be that fast. It can't be a werewolf or a vampire. Alexis denied. "Nonsense. How could Professor Quirrell be a werewolf or a vampire? Centaurs are a kind of arrogant creatures. Their disgust towards werewolves and vampires even led them to proactively propose to the International Magical Association to classify their tribe as animals, just to avoid being included in the same category as werewolves and vampires." Alexis felt that those centaurs were probably making it up. Anyway, in the eyes of centaurs, as long as something bad happened and the murderer was not caught, it was most likely done by werewolves or vampires. It's also possible that werewolves and vampires did it together. Finds took me to refollow the route they chased that night. Hagrid continued to describe his trip to the Forbidden Forest. The road was very clean, leaving nothing behind. As he spoke, Hagrid dug into his fur coat, took out a palm-long spider leg, and threw it into the stove. The spiders were too hospitable, and didn't even listen to my explanation. Hagrid explained aggrievedly. Alexis came to her senses, and looked at Hagrid. Who came that night, do you remember? Of course I remember. Hagrid counted on his fingers. Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Professor Slughorn, Snape, Professor Flitwick, and Professor Quirrell. You also counted Professor Quirrell's The Scarf Is Torn Off. That's right. Alexis nodded. I think there's something wrong with Quirrell. You doubt Quirrell? Hagrid exclaimed, almost jumping out of his chair. Impossible. The big man shook his head quickly, denying Alexis' suspicion. Professor Quirrell has been at Hogwarts for several years. He is so timid, it can't be him. Do you know where he goes during the holidays? Alexis asked. I heard that he traveled during the holidays to prepare for taking up the defense against the dark arts class in the new semester. This matter is not a secret. Quirrell has very solid theoretical knowledge and is very talented. It is precisely because of this that Dumbledore hired him as the teacher of defense against the dark arts. Where to travel, you know. Hagrid frowned and said uncertainly, I heard he went to Albania and encountered big trouble there. Vampires and witches tortured him. Chapter 40. The murderer has been identified, and the inference is made. Alexis sneered. It's true that Quirrell was in big trouble in Albania, but his troubles weren't vampires and witches. He met Voldemort. You know, Hagrid, although I have been traveling in the past few years, I have not given up looking for Voldemort's whereabouts. I suspect that Voldemort is not dead at all. He is still lingering in a corner. Hagrid thought for a moment and his eyes widened in surprise. Do you suspect it was him he met in Albania? Then without waiting for Alexis to respond, he immediately shook his head in denial and said, Impossible. Alexis, this is impossible. Let's assume that that person is really alive. Quirrell will not be his opponent. If Professor Quirrell really met that person, he would not be able to leave Albania unless he swears allegiance to Voldemort and becomes a Death Eater, right? Alexis completed Hagrid's unfinished words regardless of Hagrid's shocked expression. He continued speaking. If he really met Voldemort and became a Death Eater, everything would make sense. Voldemort threatened him, and Quirrell, who had always been brilliant, was frightened, so he became nervous and stuttered after coming out of Albania. Because Voldemort was killed by his own death curse 11 years ago, he only has a residual soul left. If he wants to continue to survive, he can only live in other people. That's why Quirrell wears a turban. No. Hagrid retorted. Alexis, you also saw that there is no shadow of that person on Professor Quirrell. The scarf you tore off with your own hands that night. Who said Voldemort can only be parasitic on humans? If he can only be parasitic on humans, how did he survive in the Albanian forest for these 11 years? Quirrell should have transferred Voldemort early that night. Sister, my hands will prove my innocence, which will facilitate subsequent actions. That's why even the centaurs couldn't catch up with the murderer in the Forbidden Forest that night, and why the murderer could pass through the spider's territory so easily. After thinking about it carefully, Hagrid shook his head, still not quite believing what Alexis said. Alexis's guess is indeed a bit sensational. Although his guess sounds logical, there are many aspects that have not been verified and are just his speculations. Determining that a person has become a Death Eater based on mere speculation is something that a kind and upright ranger of the Forbidden Forest cannot do. Alexis also expected this. He did not expect to convince Hagrid just by guessing. He knew Hagrid's integrity and kindness. When he was reading point, this guy never hesitates to treat others with the utmost kindness. It's okay. Hagrid, we can do an experiment. Alexis said. The blood of unicorns can make people energetic and nourish their souls. But unicorns are a symbol of holiness. The souls of people contaminated with unicorn blood will no longer be intact and cannot touch holy people. To find out if he was the murderer that night, all you have to do is let Quirrell touch the Holy One. A holy man? Hagrid was a little confused. He was not good at potions. He didn't know the effects of unicorn blood that Alexis mentioned. However, he knew that Alexis was a master of potions that was not inferior to Snape. That should be correct. Now he wondered where to find a holy person. This is easy to handle. Alexis smiled slightly. Little Harry who can kill Voldemort is a holy person. Seeing Hagrid's hesitant expression, Alexis continued to persuade. Hagrid, you know my relationship with James. I will not put little Harry in danger. If that night, it will be me who becomes Harry's godfather, not that bastard Sirius. At Hogwarts, Quirrell can't make any waves. Even if Voldemort is included, it will be the same. Hagrid thought that Alexis gave him a dragon egg when they met in order to pick Harry up in person. You know, although dragons are not endangered magical creatures now, the value of a dragon egg is still very high. Even the eggs of artificially raised fire dragons are estimated to be worth thousands or even tens of thousands of galleons. What's more, this is a wild dragon egg. Not to mention Jeng, this is a rare Chinese fire dragon egg. Okay, what do you want to do? Tomorrow morning is Quirrell's defense against the dark arts class, which happens to be for the first grade. I only have classes in the afternoon tomorrow. Maybe we can go and observe Professor Quirrell's lecture. After all, he has put in so much effort to prepare for the class. Alexis has not forgotten Quirrell's provocation to him the night before. He is not a gentleman. Revenge never takes place overnight. Now, after 2 nights, Quirrell has already taken advantage of him. Am I going to? I'll tell you the results. After chatting for a while, Alexis said goodbye and left. He did not tell Hagrid what would happen to people with incomplete souls and evil souls stained with unicorn blood when they touched holy people. Leaving Hagrid's hut, Alexis walked into Professor McGonagall's office. He wanted to observe Quirrell's teaching, which was actually against the rules. He had to say hello to the principal in advance. Now Alexis didn't want to see Dumbledore, so she had to bite the bullet and come to greet the serious Professor McGonagall. Good evening, Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall was grading homework. When she heard the noise, she raised her head from the pile of homework books and looked at Alexis with a smile on her face. Good evening, Mr. Felix. What can you do? Although Alexis was naughty when he was a student, of course, Alexis is not honest now, but he is very sensible and respects his teachers. Coupled with Dumbledore's relationship, McGonagall and others are very interested in Alexis. Sith are pretty good. As for the strict, but not strict Professor McGonagall, is that still Professor McGonagall? That's right, Professor McGonagall. Alexis rubbed her hands and said a little embarrassedly, I took 2 classes today and I feel like I'm lacking. I heard that Professor Quirrell, the teacher of the defense against the dark arts class, is a very talented person. It just so happens that I don't have a class tomorrow morning. I want to go to his class and learn from his teaching experience. I would like to apologize for my rudeness the night before yesterday. Professor McGonagall raised her eyebrows. She intuitively felt that Alexis would not be so kind, but she could not guess what kind of medicine Alexis was selling in his gourd. Will Alexis apologize? He once burned off half of Dumbledore's beloved beard. The distressed Dumbledore had tears in his eyes and did not see him apologize. Think about this guy's naughty behavior in school. When did he ever apologize? He will apologize. Aha, unless Merlin is alive. Chapter 41. The trap has been set. The ambush is over, just waiting for the enemy to come in. But Professor McGonagall couldn't figure out what Alexis was going to do. Point thinking that there shouldn't be any big problems in Hogwarts. He nodded in agreement. Seeing that Professor McGonagall agreed, Alexis had achieved her goal and hurriedly left and exited the office. After standing in the corridor for a moment, Alexis curled her lips, hummed and walked downstairs. He was in a good mood now, and suddenly he didn't want to go back to the office to do research. He wanted to go have a drink with Flitwick. Where to find Flitwick? Not an office, not a cafeteria, not even the principal's office. Alexis grabbed the windbreaker and put on the top hat, left Hogwarts and walked towards Hogsmeade. Hogsmeade is a small village not far from Hogwarts. It is the only wizarding village in the UK with only wizards and no muggles. It is very famous. Hogwarts students are allowed to go to Hogsmeade on Saturdays, but only those in their 3rd year and above must have assigned permission from their guardian. When Alexis was studying, he secretly forged guardian signatures and made a lot of money from students. To find Flitwick, if it's school time, just go to the classroom. If it's break time, he'll probably be in the Three Broomsticks pub in Hogsmeade. The Three Broomsticks is a very famous bar. Almost every wizard who comes to Hogsmeade will go there to sit. There is delicious mead there, a beautiful and enchanting landlady, and a messy and noisy environment. There is a mixture of good and bad people there. Everyone is their point. It's a great place to get information. I don't know why Professor Flitwick likes to go there, Alexis thought as she walked. He had made some guesses with James, and James and others agreed that Professor Flitwick was attracted to the bar owner, Ms. Rosmerta, but he did not have the confidence to confess his love successfully, so he went to the bar whenever he had time to drink wine. Alexis scoffed at their suggestion. He didn't understand how someone as powerful as Professor Flitwick could fall in love with the boss of the Three Broomsticks. They all said that Ms. Rosmerta from the Three Broomsticks was beautiful. Why didn't he see that? In addition to having bigger breasts, there is a lot of fat accumulation. With a figure like this, if a fight breaks out, you will suffer the consequences. Her breasts are so big, they must be burdensome. Alexis even felt a little sorry for Rosmerta, so every time he walked into the Three Broomsticks, he would always look at his boss strangely. There is absolutely no way Professor Flitwick would like this guy. To this day, Alexis still insists on his opinion. When I came to Hogsmeade and walked into the Three Broomsticks pub, I felt a familiar smell. The bar was very noisy, filled with smoke, and the air was filled with the aroma of tobacco and wine. Wizards who looked weird to ordinary people crowded into the room. They held wine glasses, talked loudly, and laughed from time to time, and then clucked. He drank the beer in one gulp. Alexis paused at the door for a moment. His eyes passed through the smoke and stayed on the cumbersome boss for a moment, scanning his chest, and his eyes began to show pity. It's so pitiful that I can't move easily. TSK. Then he swept across the bar and finally stopped in the middle of the bar. Professor Flitwick. Flitwick was drinking a large glass of mead in one gulp when he heard a familiar voice and looked back with a smile on his face. Alexis. Why are you here? Alexis gave Flitwick a hug, and just as a drinker next to him got up and left, he sat down next to Flitwick and said with a smile, I was planning on having a drink with you. A glass of mead, thank you. Alexis smiled politely at the cumbersome boss, the pity in his eyes deepening. After several years of not seeing each other, her figure has become more and more bloated, which is so pitiful. I guess if she doesn't pay attention now, she will be able to balance her body. The cumbersome boss put on a stiff smile, poured a glass of mead, and knocked it heavily on the bar. Every time this guy comes, he looks at me with pity. Damn it, what is he pitying for? Alexis, it's rude to look at a lady like that. Flitwick patted Alexis on the back and whispered in his ear. Alexis took a sip of the mead and nodded. He didn't mean that he understood Flitwick's words. He just nodded because the mead here still tastes the same. If it weren't for the delicious mead from the Three Broomsticks, he wouldn't be here. Flitwick, I plan to observe Professor Quirrell's defense against the dark arts class tomorrow morning. Alexis got straight to the point and told her plan directly. Fortunately, he also knew that this was a bar with a mixed crowd, so he just whispered in Flitwick's ear. Flitwick looked at Alexis in surprise. He didn't quite understand why Alexis was so obsessed with Professor Quirrell. In fact, Professor Flitwick has always given people a very strange feeling. He has no comment on the Ministry of Magic's statement that Voldemort has been killed, and he never expresses opinions on people's practice of not discussing, reporting, or mentioning point. He only concentrates on teaching students. At first glance, Professor Flitwick is easy to ignore or even despise. Because his ancestors have goblin blood, Professor Flitwick is very short. Because of the mixed blood problem, his status in the wizarding world is a bit embarrassing. It seems that, because of the blood problem, Professor Flitwick and Hagrid, a guy who is also mixed blood, the relationship is good. But Alexis doesn't play Professor Joe Flitwick. He once lived to be the champion of the duel competition and was a very good wizard. He is very experienced in fighting, and Alexis has asked him for advice. He is very kind to Lily and others and is not prejudiced. Overall, Alexis liked Professor Flitwick. Being with him made Alexis relaxed and peaceful. Alexis, Flitwick asked in a calm tone, do you think there is something wrong with Professor Quirrell? See, this is what sets Professor Flitwick apart. Alexis thought to herself. When other people hear about his idea, their first reaction is usually to deny it, thinking that he is fooling around, and then stop him. But Professor Flitwick was different. He will first understand your thoughts, listen to your explanation, then give his own opinions and judgments, and finally leave the decision-making power in your hands. He will never make decisions for you without permission. What a nice guy. Alexis thought so in her mind, and whispered or repeated what Hagrid said. Professor Flitwick pondered for a moment without expressing his opinion. He stood up to pay the bill, left the 3 broomsticks, and walked slowly towards Hogwarts with Alexis. What you said makes sense, but most of it is speculation. Professor Flitwick spoke slowly, and gave his own suggestions. Alexis, we can't convict people, based on mere speculation. But your idea is also very feasible. Maybe you can try it. But be careful not to let Professor Quirrell or others know. In case Professor Quirrell is okay, this will make things awkward between you. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42. Harry answered so well. Come and pat him on the shoulder. Back at Hogwarts, the two stayed in Flitwick's office for a while until late at night before Alexis said goodbye and left. Early the next morning, when Hermione walked into the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom after breakfast, she immediately saw Alexis sitting in the last row, writing and drawing something on a book. Mr. Alexis? Hermione was a little surprised and ran over to say hello. Alexis put down her book and said hello with a smile. Good morning, Miss Granger. Good morning, Mr. Alexis. Hermione asked doubtfully, why are you here too? Could it be? Alexis knew what she was thinking. He came to Hogwarts on the Hogwarts Express with a few little guys. They all knew Alexis' strength. In the eyes of these little guys, Alexis' strength is obviously higher than that of their Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Professor Quirrell. After all, Alexis has achievements that can be seen with the naked eye, but Professor Quirrell is confused all day long, and he seems to have lost his soul. He does not look like a powerful wizard at first glance. Seeing Alexis appearing in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, Hermione thought the teacher had changed for this course. I'm here to listen to other teachers' classes and learn from them, Alexis explained. Visibly, Hermione's expression was a little disappointed, but she quickly regained her composure and saw her classmates walking in one after another. After saying hello to Alexis, she quickly ran to the front row and found a place to sit down. When Harry and Ron arrived at the classroom was almost full, and other students were chattering about something. The current Professor Quirrell has a weak character and is distracted all day long. He has no energy to manage the energetic little wizards, which makes the little wizards become unscrupulous in class. Harry and Ron hurriedly found a seat to sit down and continued to talk quietly together. They did not notice that a new classmate had arrived in today's Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Alexis' eyes stayed on Harry for a few seconds, then moved away silently. Harry didn't seem to be in good spirits. He seemed to be suffering from lack of sleep and was yawning constantly. This reminded Alexis of the time when they were studying, sneaking out at night wearing James' cloak, and wandering around the Hogwarts building at midnight. Several people sat on the windows of the tower, blowing in the wind, drinking beer. Alexis shook his head slightly, bringing himself back from memories to reality, and shifted his gaze to a little fat man. The little fat boy had the Gryffindor emblem embroidered on his chest, and had baby fat on his face. It was rare for an 11-year-old to still have baby fat. The little boy seemed out of place with the lively discussions among the young wizards around him. He huddled in the corner alone, with his head lowered and silent. Alexis felt that the little guy's profile looked familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere. Before Alexis could think clearly, a familiar smell drifted into his nostrils, making him frown. There was a brief silence in the classroom, and then louder whispers erupted, like in a vegetable market. "It stinks. He absolutely stinks, Merlin, please. Did he fall into the toilet? Maybe he's sleeping in the toilet." Complaints resounded in the classroom. Quirrell walked into the classroom wearing his ridiculous scarf. Professor Quirrell was unaware of the noise in the classroom. He spread out the lesson plan under his arm on the desk and tapped the desk lightly. This did not do anything to maintain order in the classroom. Effect, and then start the lecture with a stammering tone. The sound below was still buzzing like 100,000 flies. Alexis was sitting in the back row and could barely hear Professor Quirrell's voice point. This forced him to brace himself, put his hands behind his ears, and listen carefully. This is nothing like what he planned. Alexis remembered that Voldemort had unsuccessfully applied for the position of Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts many times. Now that he was possessing Professor Quirrell, it could be regarded as a dream come true in disguise. Is this the result? Is this how he teaches the class? Alexis thought to herself that Dumbledore still had a good sense. Fortunately, he didn't agree to Voldemort's request. Wouldn't this be harmful to people? He listened carefully for a while and roughly understood the content of Quirrell's class. He talks about self-defense against magical creatures, and this class is about facing vampires. Maybe it was because the previous lesson was not finished and this lesson was only the second half, which made Alexis feel a little weird. The first stop he started on his global journey was Europe. In a few years, he traveled to almost all cities and mountains in Europe and came into contact with more vampires than most wizards would see in a lifetime. He felt that Professor Quirrell was wrong. For example, Quirrell said that vampires are afraid of the sun because of the power of the Bible. Alexis conducted experiments and found that vampires are not afraid of the sun. The Bible does not give the sun the duty to kill vampires. The reason why they are burned by the sun is because of the ultraviolet rays in the sun. Without sunlight, creating an ultraviolet radiation device can still achieve the same killing effect of sunlight. But what Quirrell said about garlic is right. Vampires are not afraid of garlic. Like the little wizards under the podium, they just think the smell of garlic is too unpleasant. After listening for a while, Quirrell began to talk about the lethality of silverware against vampires. Alexis was drowsy. He got up early, intending to guide Quirrell to pat Harry on the shoulder during a well-organized Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson, but the actual situation had nothing to do with his plan. Yawning again, just when Alexis thought the plan had failed, Quirrell's question suddenly came from the podium. "Ha ha ha, Mr. Lee. Please come back to answer the questions, to ask the questions." Alexis felt a little more energetic and almost didn't get scared to death by Quirrell's stuttering. He thought to himself, no matter what the question was, no matter how Harry answered, as long as Harry spoke, he would heckle him, and said to Quirrell, "What Harry said is really good. Shouldn't you pat him on the shoulder and encourage him?" Plan accomplished. Harry stood up in confusion, his eyes full of fatigue and confusion, but he didn't speak. "I don't know what he did last night." Alexis was about to die. No matter what the problem is, Harry, just talk. However, there was no telepathy between him and Harry. Harry had no idea that his uncle was sitting in the corner of the classroom and that his uncle was almost driven to death by him. Harry looked around blankly and finally looked at Hermione in front of him. Hermione was turning back and mouthing to Harry quietly. Chapter 43. Alexis returns to his old career. Ha 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 ha. Classmate Harry, come on. Pay attention to your listening and speaking in class. Quirrell seemed to like Harry very much. He didn't blame Harry, he just warned him and waved his hand for Harry to sit down. Alexis scratched his head and head anxiously, and he almost wanted to go up and force Rakiro's hand to put it on Harry's shoulders. The next lesson was uneventful. Quirrell was talking to himself in the front, the little wizards were talking to themselves below, and Alexis was napping in the back row. Everyone was doing their own thing, which was very interesting, harmonious. Until the end of get out of class, Alexis didn't find her chance at all. The little wizards walked out in small groups with smiles and quickly emptied the classroom. Ron and Harry originally planned to drag Hermione into the classroom for the next class, but Hermione pulled them to the back of the classroom, which made them confused. They didn't realize, until they came to Alexis, that there was someone sitting here. "Harry, what's the matter?" After Alexis said hello to the three little guys, she looked at the thick dark circles on Harry's face and asked. Harry looked at Alexis and shook his head silently. Ron on the side scratched his head anxiously. Just as he was about to speak, he was stopped by Harry gently tugging at the corner of his clothes. "Mr. Alexis, the two of them violated school rules yesterday." Hermione spoke up and complained directly to Alexis, hoping that Alexis could persuade Harry. Unfortunately, she didn't know that Alexis was also a troublemaker, even more dishonest than Harry, when they were in school. As Hermione told Alexis, it became clear what was happening. Yesterday after potions get out of class, they had a quarrel with Malfoy in the corridor, and the two sides agreed to have a duel between wizards in the main building at midnight. Harry and Ron secretly got up at midnight to prepare for an appointment, but were caught by Hermione. After trying to persuade her to no avail, Hermione followed her to the main building. The three of them searched around, but failed to find Malfoy, and were almost caught by Filch. After the three of them ran back to the Gryffindor common room, they had a bit of a quarrel. "Okay, it's not a big deal," Alexis said after listening to Hermione's story. "Mr. Alexis," Hermione shouted anxiously. Alexis waved her hand at Hermione and said seriously, "Let's do this. I remember you only have one class tomorrow morning. Today, after the afternoon class is over, you can come to my office to find me, and I will take you somewhere." Alexis was going to take the three little ones to Hogsmeade to have fun and check out a dessert shop. "Yesterday, I went to Hogsmeade to find Flitwick. I didn't bother to go to the shop. I just happened to take Iron Triangle to relax, let them relax their relationship, and take a look at the operation of the dessert shop." "Okay." Hermione was about to say something, but Alexis interrupted her with a wave of her hand. "You still have classes. Go quickly, don't be late." Their next class was herbology, Miss Sprout's class. After sending Iron Triangle away, Alexis stood up, stretched his muscles, and walked slowly to the office. He had a very relaxed day, and only had one lesson for the 4th grade from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. Back in the office, Alexis did not continue to prepare lessons. He came to the laboratory, squeezed the juice of grass leaves with extreme force, mixed several kinds of juice together, and added some spices to it, and a bottle of blue-green ink was freshly baked. He pulled out a clean piece of paper, picked up the wand, and cast a spell. The quill flew up, dipped in ink, and wrote crookedly lines on the paper. Special permission was given to Gryffindor House first-year students Hermione Granger, Harry Potter, and Ron Weasley to go to Hogwarts under the supervision of Alexis Felix. Dee bought a variety of snacks from Felix dessert shop and returned to campus before tonight. At the end is Dumbledore's signature. Alexis was able to imitate Dumbledore's ink and handwriting when he was a child, but at that time he used handwriting, which was a bit substandard after all. Later, under the joint research of James and others, they improved the method and used magic spells to make the handwriting exactly the same as Dumbledore's. This was one of the ways Alexis used to make money while in school. After writing the principal's order letter, Alexis put the ink and quill into the drawer, picked up the letter, looked at it, and nodded with satisfaction. "It's very good. It hasn't been used for several years and the craftsmanship has not deteriorated." After doing this, Alexis hummed and began to think about Quirrell's side of things. The plan to force Quirrell to touch Harry in class was aborted, but Alexis was still unwilling to give up. He thought for a long time and suddenly thought that no matter what methods Quirrell and Voldemort used, their goals should never change. When he went to deliver a letter to Harry, Dumbledore asked him to help him retrieve something from Gringotts. As a result, Gringotts was attacked shortly after he retrieved it. Then Quirrell entered Hogwarts with Voldemort's remnant soul and went into danger alone. This shows that Voldemort did not give up the Philosopher's Stone at all. Yes, it's the Philosopher's Stone. Made by Nicolame, it is said to be a magic stone that turns stone into gold and can be used to make potions of immortality. Alexis wasn't very interested in this thing. If he was interested, he would have cut it off halfway and played with it himself. Of course, if he was interested, Dumbledore wouldn't let him get it. He could probably guess what Voldemort wanted to do with the Philosopher's Stone. Voldemort's goal has not changed from the beginning to the end. Whether it is controlling pureblood families, or forming Death Eaters, including later starting a war in the wizarding world and a series of other things, these are all his methods. In fact, his ultimate goal is immortality. This is exactly what Alexis dislikes about Voldemort. He has never heard of anyone who sought immortality having a good ending. Live well. Why do you want immortality? If you don't lose, who will lose? If you don't have a nose, who doesn't? In this case, Alexis thought that he could just find the Philosopher's Stone, leak the news to Quirrell, and then arrest his brother for the crime. Alexis carefully recalled the memories in her mind, stood up and left the office. At this time, students were in class, professors were giving lectures, and the entire main building of Hogwarts was empty. Very convenient for Alexis. He followed his memory to the 4th floor, and found a room at the end of the corridor. A three-headed giant dog was guarding the door, looking down at him. The giant dog seemed to be very curious about Alexis. Each of its 3 heads was tilted into different shapes. Sticky saliva dripped from the corners of its mouth, and fell to the floor, gathering into a small puddle. Louis? Alexis waved to the 3-headed dog, and gave a tentative shout. Woof. Woof woof woo woo. The ferocious 3-headed dog heard Alexis call and happily approached Alexis. Its 3 heads crowded each other, and kept nudged Alexis. Haha, don't make trouble Louis, haha, don't make trouble. Alexis stroked the 3-headed dog's chin, and was laughed out loud by Louis. This is a 3-headed dog raised by Hagrid. Hagrid named him Louis. Chapter 44, Alexis' Stealing Journey. Wait for me a while, Alexis warned, returned to the office, and searched around. Seeing that Horn was no longer there, he tiptoed to the wooden box. Iragio hole opened. The not so fine lock on the wooden box opened with a sound. Alexis picked up a cloth bag, secretly took out a lot of meat strips from it and packed it, then locked the lock. He looked around guiltily and saw that Horn had indeed not noticed. He quietly left the office and returned to the 4th floor room. Try my new creation. Alexis poured the dried meat in front of Louis, and it quickly formed a calf-high mound. Louis let out a cry of joy, put his 3 heads in front of the dried meat, and swallowed it in big mouthfuls. The tail behind it kept wagging, showing that it was in a very happy mood at this time. After finishing the dried meat quickly, Louis stretched out his tongue to lick the floor with unfinished content, and moved his 3 heads in front of Alexis. Wow, are there any more? That's all. Alexis shook her head, and lowered her voice and said, I stole this from Horn. If you like to eat, how about I cook some for you, and bring it over tomorrow? Hearing Horn's name, the 3-headed dog shuddered and nodded quickly. Good boy Louis, tell me what's hidden behind. Alexis stroked Louis's head and asked, did Dumbledore hide it? The 3-headed dog hesitated. I'll make you your favorite roasted suckling pig. And dessert, chocolate cake. Alexis continued her seduction. The 3-headed dog is different from ordinary dogs, in that it can eat sweets and chocolate, which is amazing. Yeah, cannot eat it. And yeah, always showed disgust at the desserts made by Alexis. Wang. Wang wang. When the 3-headed dog heard about the chocolate cake and roasted suckling pig, his mouth immediately started to water, and the 3 heads talked about everything. You're so good Louis. I'll bring it to you tomorrow night. After hearing this, Alexis patted Louis on the head and turned to leave. He didn't think about forcing his way in. Although Louis told him the secret, it was limited to this. It was impossible to let Louis give way. If you want to get in, you have to either find a way around Louis, or go head on and break in violently. Louis is huge, and many spells have little effect on him. In a place like Hogwarts where apparition cannot be performed, if you want to defeat Louis and force his way in without alerting others, it will be a big blow to Alexis. It's a bit difficult to say. Besides, so what if I get through? Louis just told him that it was just the first level, and there would be Professor Sprout's Devil's Net, Professor Flitwick's Flying Key, Professor McGonagall's life-size wizard chess, and Professor Quirrell's Mountain Giant. Monsters, Professor Snape's Potions Puzzle, and Dumbledore's Mirror of Verized 6 levels. This was not much different from the plot in his memory, but what Louis revealed included all the details. The previous levels are not particularly difficult for Alexis. The only difficulty is Dumbledore's Eris sunglasses. Alexis was deeply impressed by this thing. He had seen it when he was a child. Every time he took a photo, he saw something different. Later, it was completely empty inside. Alexis remembers that in the plot, Harry took the Philosopher's Stone directly from Eris' sunglasses, but based on Alexis' understanding of Dumbledore, it was definitely not that simple for Dumbledore to dare to choose Eris' sunglasses for the final level. What he hates most is these messy things like moods and desires. This thing is simply the most difficult thing for him. He would rather face an adult Hungarian horntail dragon than face these headaches. Alexis wasn't going to continue until he found a way around Fluvy and Eris' sunglasses. However, there is something to do when I go to the dessert shop in Hogsmeade tonight. Back in the office, Alexis was awakened by a cooing sound. The wooden box on the table was opened, revealing the small bag inside. Horn was standing in front of the wooden box, flapping his wings, turning his flexible head, and looking at Alexis with a pair of round eyes. "When did you come back? You scared me to death." Alexis patted his chest, a little guilty. "What's the matter?" Cuckoo Horn jumped, his wings flapping against the wooden box. "Ah, I didn't move. Isn't the key with you?" Alexis' eyes widened with a puzzled expression, her inner alarm bells blaring, and she turned on the performance mode and entered the state of an actor. Goo. Goo goo. Goo goo goo. Horn looked at the wooden box, opened the bag with one paw, flapped the bag with his wings, and screamed at Alexis. "No, no, no." Alexis waved his hand repeatedly and took out his wand. "I didn't use the magic spell. You can check it. I definitely didn't use it." He took out his wand and another wand with the same core as his own and pressed the two together. Flashback curse. The flashback spell is an investigative spell in which two wands with the same core are pressed together to force the other wand to replay the last spell it said it cast. Because the flashback spell requires the same characteristics of the wand core, it is easy for the controller to reverse the spell, such as Alexis' wand glowed slightly. Seeing the light, Alexis' expression changed, and she was about to put away her wand, but it was already too late. Irajo hole opened, the two wands separate. There was an awkward atmosphere in the air. Alexis put away her wand stiffly and looked at Horn. Without blinking, Horn stretched out his wings and patted the wooden box, then pointed at Alexis. "The evidence is conclusive. What else do you have to say?" Alexis was speechless and wished she could crawl into the cracks in the ground. "I wonder how I, the wise and wise third generation Demon King, fell victim to a small flashback curse." "Well, Horn, listen to my explanation." Alexis waved her hands and began to argue. "I saw Luwei in the corridor." "Luwei, remember? Hagrid's three-headed dog, the one you bullied when you were a kid. You almost plucked all of his hair out. Seeing that he was hungry, I just wanted to give him some food." Horn just looked at him quietly, which made Alexis' voice become smaller and smaller as he spoke. "I'll make it up to you." "Goo-hoo-hoo. 3 times?" Alexis stared at Horn in disbelief. "Why don't you go and grab it?" "Cuckoo cuckoo. Am I robbing? Am I robbing? I am. Stealing. Okay, 3 times. 3 times is 3 times." Alexis recalled the last time the house elf looked at him in the kitchen and suddenly felt hopeless. He glared fiercely at Horn, who was counting the dried meats proudly, opened the cabinet, and took out a stack of books as high as one person. "Horn, now I have a task for you." Alexis smiled evilly and came closer. "Send these books to Huang Weijun. Then ask him to buy me kilograms of hot pot base. You can help me carry it. Come back. Go quickly. I have an urgent need." Goo-hoo-hoo. Chapter 45. Grade 4. In the afternoon, there was a knock on Alexis' office door. "Please come in." Alexis didn't expect the 3 Harrys to come so early. He has a 4th grade pharmacy course later. He took out his course schedule and looked at it. "In this world, they should be in class. Can't you get your Quidditch flying lessons?" Seeing Alexis' serious expression, Harry quickly explained. "Mr. Alexis, you are mistaken. Our class schedule is not this." Hermione also explained. "You remembered it wrong this morning. We only have 1 class this afternoon, and it will be full tomorrow morning." Harry and Ron immediately glared at Hermione. Hermione was not afraid, raised her head, and looked at the two of them, and stared back fiercely. "I have another class for 4th grade students later. I will take you out after the class is over." Alexis asked. "Now, are you going to wait for me in the office, or are you going to follow me in class to observe?" We'll do it right here. I'm going with you, Mr. Alexis. 3 people spoke at the same time. After talking about their choices, Hermione looked sideways with contempt in her eyes. Alexis was very familiar with this look. It was the disdain of a top student towards a bad student. Although he was not considered a scumbag when he was in school, his grades were only average. There was a witch in the same grade who had the same combat experience as him and kept glaring at him like this. James told Lupin that the top student had taken a liking to him, while Black and Alexis thought they should find the female top student privately, have a hearty wizard duel with him, defeat her, and tell her, although his grades are average, he has rich combat experience. Mr. Alexis? Alexis shivered and came back to her senses. He took out his pocket watch and looked at it. It was almost 3 o'clock. Harry, Ron, you stay in the office. There is a laboratory in the back. You can go in and have a look, but don't move around. If you go to the front, don't offend Horn. Alexis warned, took the lesson plan and book, and looked at Hermione. Miss Granger, that's a good textbook. Let's go to class. Saying goodbye to Harry and Ron, Alexis led Hermione into the potions classroom. The 4th grade class is only 1 hour long, but the number of students who signed up is not large, a full 33. At this grade level, classroom discipline is much better than before. Although it is still 5 minutes to 3 o'clock, the little wizards in the classroom are already sitting neatly. Alexis led Hermione into the classroom. There was a brief noise in the quiet classroom, and then it quickly returned to silence. Alexis arranged for Hermione to sit at the desk and glanced at the little wizards below. He noticed that the group of young wizards seemed to be taking advantage of the time between classes to do their homework. When Alexis came in, they quickly changed into the textbooks for the pharmacy class and came out. This was the brief commotion before. In the 4th grade, classes will no longer be as easy as before. Various courses are fully scheduled, and after school homework becomes more and more. Alexis walked out of Hogwarts, and he was very clear about the curriculum of each grade in Hogwarts. Putting the lesson plan on the desk, Alexis coughed lightly, briefly introduced himself, and then started class. The 4th grade pharmacy classroom layout is different from the previous 3 grades. According to the complete textbook arrangement of magic, potions, and botany, the first 3 grades are theoretical teaching, instilling new ideas in potions to young wizards. In the 4th grade, there is an interaction between theory and practice similar to the potions course. Integrated teaching methods. Here, the teaching aids purchased by Alexis finally came into use. In the past 3 years of study, you should have learned a lot about the processing of medicinal materials. That was given to you by Professor Snape in the potions class, but in the potions class, I ask you to forget these. We have to learn a whole new way of handling herbs. Alexis spoke. He pointed to the mortar and simple centrifuge on the desk. Everyone knows the mortar. Now I want to introduce this machine. This is a centrifuge, a machine that uses the centrifugal force generated by high-speed rotation to separate liquids and solid particles or components in a mixture of liquids and liquids. It is very common in the Muggle world, but here, you may be the first one exposure to it. Its efficiency is several times higher than that of a crucible plus an alcohol lamp. The traditional magic potion extraction process is very simple. It simply processes the required parts and then boils them in a crucible. This level of use is a huge waste of medicinal materials. Alexis once conducted an experiment to compare the utilization rate of centrifuge and traditional medicinal material production process. The centrifuge was at least 3 times that of traditional process. Alexis originally wanted to explain the working principle of the centrifuge, but seeing the curious looks of the little wizards, and thinking that starting from the 4th grade, his class only lasted 1 hour, he had to give up regretfully. Now Alexis was a little suspicious of the wizarding world's education methods. Is it really okay to only teach courses related to spells and potions without teaching mathematics, physics and chemistry? However, these are not issues that he needs to think about yet. Each of you has a small set of materials prepared on your desk. These materials can be used to prepare a pair of insect repellent. Insect repellent is a good companion for travelers and explorers. It can effectively repel 80.00% of currently known insects. The recipe for the repellent is in the textbook, and the process of making it is very simple. In this class, I will lead you to make it. By making the repellent, you can become familiar with the use of these devices. As he spoke, Alexis picked up 2 mint leaves, crushed them in a mortar, put them into a test tube with a horn spoon, and put them in a centrifuge. Then mash several other medicinal materials one by one, and put them into the centrifuge. In the past potions class, crushing the medicinal materials was the entire process of processing the medicinal materials. The next step should be to boil the potion. But in the pharmacy class, crushing the medicinal materials is only the first step. Next, we need to use a centrifuge to help us further extract the essence of the medicinal materials. Alexis demonstrates how to use the centrifuge. Fix the test tube, cover it, set the time and speed, and press the switch. Woo 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 woo, the small centrifuge immediately started spinning, causing the entire desk to make a buzzing sound. When the set time was reached, the centrifuge automatically stopped rotating, opened the lid, and took out the test tube inside. The originally turbid medicinal materials in the test tube actually became stratified. The dregs of the medicinal materials settled at the bottom of the test tube, while the clear and usable part was above. Okay, it's your turn. Alexis made a simple mixing and debugging, and a fresh set of insect repellent was released. The little wizards find it interesting to make potions in this way, which is much simpler than the stressful potion making. They all started to move their hands. The entire pharmacy classroom was immediately filled with buzzing sounds. Chapter 46, Ripples. Alexis stepped off the podium and shuttled back and forth among the little wizards, correcting irregularities from time to time. At first, the little wizards were unfamiliar with Alexis. They took a cautious attitude and listened to the class honestly. But soon, they found that this pharmacy course was very interesting, and teacher Alexis did not seem to be interested in it. Unlike Professor Snape, who kept a straight face all day long, as if someone owed him a bag of gold galleons, Alexis was also happy to talk to the little wizards. Although he was the same age as Snape in terms of age, his mentality was much younger than Snape. No, you have to be careful. Although the medical level in the wizarding world is much higher than that in the muggle world, centrifuges are not without danger. Alexis stops a curious little lion who is about to open the centrifuge lid and start it. If you don't strictly follow the operating procedures, the test tube will fly out, and the high-speed rotating internal structure can easily crush anything, such as human bones. As he spoke, Alexis arranged defenses around the centrifuge, turned on the centrifuge, and after the centrifuge spun at high speed, he pulled out a bone from somewhere and threw it in. Zzzz, the centrifuge grinded the bone into powder without hesitation, causing a burst of exclamations from the little wizards who were watching. Alexis stopped the centrifuge and cleaned the inside. Look, it's very dangerous. So you should pay attention and strictly follow the procedures I taught you when operating. The little lion nodded, with a lingering fear on his face. If it weren't for the Alexis organization, he would even want to put his hand in and see what was going on. Soon, the little wizards almost all made it successfully. Alexis took out his pocket watch and looked at it. Get out of class was about to end. Perhaps you have some doubts about what I said about utilization rate and efficacy. Alexis returned to the podium and said seriously, assign homework now. It will be checked next class. Hearing this, the cheerful expressions of the little wizards disappeared, and Alexis even heard a sigh coming from below. The formulas in the textbook can also be prepared using the methods in the potions class. In class, everyone has used new methods to prepare potions. Now go back and use the potions method to prepare a new repellent potion. The next class will be, we will compare the advantages and disadvantages of the two agents from all angles. Okay, get out of class is over. How do you feel? Alexis asked Hermione on the way back. Awesome. Hermione looked very excited and chattered all the way. Mr. Alexis, is it really possible to prepare all potions in this way? Finally, Hermione asked again. Of course can. Alexis raised an eyebrow, leaned down and whispered, in order to ensure the correctness of this theory, I have personally tested all the potion formulas that are available on the market and can be collected. Okay, we are going to go out and play soon. Let's think about this later. With that said, Alexis pushed open the office door. Fortunately, Horn was still squatting beside the wooden box. Ever since Alexis stole his jerky, he refused to go to the owl loft. Harry and Ron were sleeping on the table point. Hearing the sound of the door opening, he raised his head and looked over in a daze. "Okay, gentlemen." Alexis clapped his hands. "There is a pool in the back. Go wash your face and wake up. You have 5 minutes to prepare. We will set off in 5 minutes." Harry and Ron cheered, rushed into the laboratory, and began to wash their faces to wake up. The process of leaving Hogwarts school was easier than Alexis imagined. This made him sigh. It seems that after they graduated, the management of Hogwarts became much more relaxed. Thinking back to the beginning, Iffy, James, Lupin, and Black, along with Lily, wanted to sneak out of Hogwarts. They would have to take a secret passage, put on James' invisibility cloak, and go out late and return early. Thinking of the invisibility cloak and the Marauder's map, Alexis' heart moved, and she looked at Harry, who looked excited. The invisibility cloak is a treasure of the Potter family. Putting it on can make people invisible. The Marauder's map was discovered after they arrived at Hogwarts. It clearly shows the entire Hogwarts and activities within the map name and route. These two treasures are an important basis for them to cause trouble and do evil in the school. Unfortunately, James later saw the curious look Alexis was looking at the cloak, so he hid the invisibility cloak and refused to let him study it. I don't know if Harry found the invisibility cloak and the Marauder's map. Harry didn't know what Alexis was thinking. He was in a state of excitement. First year freshmen are not allowed to go to Hogsmeade. They have long heard the seniors around them discuss Hogsmeade and are very curious about it. I heard that the mead at the Three Broomsticks bar there is excellent. The magic candies at Honeydukes candy shop are also very popular, and Zuko's joke shop has a lot of prank materials. It is said that many of the prank props of brothers George and Fred are there. For shopping, there are also Pig's Head Bar, Mrs. Puddifu's Tea House, Felix Dessert Shop. They're about to see this. Walking into Hogsmeade, even though it was not a Saturday, as a village composed of pure wizards, it was still very lively. The shops on both sides of the street are brightly lit, the bars are full of people, and the aroma from dessert shops or candy shops can be smelled from a long distance away. Alexis took them to the center of the village and stopped in front of a dessert shop that was the size of 3 shops. Felix Dessert Shop. There is a huge sign at the door of the shop, and the sweet aroma wafts out from the shop, tempting people's tongues to secrete saliva. Harry and Ron craned their necks to look at the various exquisite desserts in the window, their eyes shining, and even Hermione couldn't help but swallow. "Let's go. This is my store," Alexis said with a smile, leading the 3 little guys into the dessert shop. The decoration of the dessert shop is very high-end. The walls are painted with cute fairy tale characters in bright colors. The warm lights illuminate the shop, but it is not dazzling. The glass counters are placed in an orderly manner, and each of the exquisite desserts is placed quietly inside. There is a nice aroma in the air. Note, in the original book, the Marauder's map was made by James and 4 others, but was later confiscated by Filch, and then passed into the hands of the twins, who gave it to Harry. The one used here was still made by James, but Alexis didn't know that it had been confiscated by Filch, or that it had fallen into the hands of the twins, not to mention that twin song Medi was given to Harry. Chapter 47, Professor Quirrell in action. Welcome to Felix's dessert shop. A young and beautiful girl came over with a sweet smile on her face and introduced with a smile, "What does the guest need?" "Our dessert shop, Una." "It's me." Alexis interrupted the girl's introduction and said with a smile, "I'm here to take a look at the store. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to look at the ledger for a while. Maybe you can walk around the store and get what you want to eat." With that said, Alexis winked at Harry and followed Una to the back. After watching Una and Alexis leave, Harry cheered, pulled Ron to the counter, took out the snowman cake inside, divided 1 piece each, and ate it with relish. Compared to Harry, Hermione and Ron seemed a little reserved. The family situation of the 2 of them is not good. Hermione's parents are dentists with ordinary knowledge. Although the Weasley family is a pure blood family, their family is not rich either. In fact, Harry should have been the most reserved at first, but with the gold galleons and the Gringotts warehouse as a base, and Alexis once told him that all the dessert shops he opened had Harry's share, which made Harry relax a lot. Alexis and Una came to the back. He briefly looked at the ledger, took out a piece of paper from his arms, and handed it to her. "Can you help me make a chocolate ball according to the drawing?" Alexis asked. The paper was drawn according to the image of the magic stone he looked up, and the size of the magic stone was also marked on it. Una took the drawing, glanced at it, and nodded. "No problem, sir. When do you want it?" "As soon as possible. It's best if I can take it back later." Upon hearing this, Una picked up the drawings, walked to the workbench, and started working immediately. Alexis and Iron Triangle were eating like crazy in their own dessert shop. On the other side, Professor Quirrell, who was at Hogwarts, was not idle either. He knocked on the principal's office door. After receiving permission, walk into the principal's office. Inside, Snape was discussing something with Dumbledore. When Quirrell came in, they all looked at him. Headmaster Dumbledore, I have something to say to you." Quirrell still stuttered, and this sloppy state made Snape frown slightly. He didn't hate Quirrell, he just didn't like this procrastination. "What's the matter, Professor Quirrell?" Dumbledore asked kindly. Yes, it's like this and everything." Quirrell stuttered as he told the story. Dumbledore and Snape listened carefully. He came to file a complaint, and the person to file a complaint was Alexis. The angle of Quirrell's complaint was not that Alexis was targeting him, nor had it anything to do with the defense against the dark arts class. His classes were always like this. He was talking about what was taught in Alexis's own pharmacy class. After careful preparation, Quirrell listed several crimes for Alexis, the core of which was to shake the students' minds. "I don't have any objections to or Alexis himself," Professor Quirrell stammered. "I'm just a little worried. If this continues, the students may have a problem with it. Ask anyone who has magic classes questions." Professor Quirrell spent an hour describing what Alexis did in class before finally concluding. He talked about the ideas that Alexis instilled into the third-year students in the first class, that wizards were backward and muggle-minded, about the cultivation of muggle-mindedness in the freshmen in the first-year class, and about the just-concluded fourth-year class, the idea of encouraging everyone to use muggle products. Finally, Quirrell expressed his concerns about the future of Hogwarts, the students, and the entire wizarding world. He believed that wizards were wizards and muggle things should not be mixed in. If Alexis keeps doing this, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry will turn into a muggle school sooner or later. After stammering a lot, he finally finished speaking. Quirrell looked at Dumbledore nervously. He didn't notice Snape next to him. At this time, he heard that Alexis was belittling potions in class, and even left homework for the students to discuss traditional potions and new methods of making potions. He was so angry that he was almost fuming about the quality of the medicine. "Okay, Professor Quirrell, I understand." Dumbledore also looked a little serious. He nodded and did not explain to Quirrell why he hired Alexis. "I will tell Alex about this and ask him to pay attention." Quirrell breathed a sigh of relief, but he did not leave. Instead, he frowned and seemed hesitant. "I heard that Mr. Alexis just took 3 first years to go to Hogsmeade. Among them is Mr. Harry Potter." Quirrell tilted his head, missing Dumbledore's gaze, and his voice became smaller and smaller. "What?" Dumbledore stood up from his chair in shock. "Quirrell, did you see it?" "Yeah. I accidentally saw it." Quirrell nodded. "Alexis." Dumbledore was still trying to figure out why Alexis did this, but Snape beside him had already tossed his loose robes, opened the door and left. "You go back first, Quirrell. I know about this matter, and I will deal with it seriously." Dumbledore was going to send Quirrell away, then catch Alexis as quickly as possible, and ask him what was going on in his mind. Quirrell Nana leaves. According to his original plan, he was to release the giant monster to attract everyone's attention, and then take the opportunity to sneak in and steal the magic stone. However, as things developed now, Quirrell discovered that there seemed to be a ready-made target there, and he was not needed at all. Unleash the trolls and arouse suspicion. The existence of Alexis is much easier to use than the troll. Alexis did not know that, while he was plotting against Quirrell, Quirrell was already taking action. He put away the simulated chocolate balls made by Una, rummaged through his dessert shop, packed a lot of desserts for Audio Technica and Louie, and left with satisfaction. After leading the three little ones around Hogsmeade again, lubricated by this happy experience, the three little ones have reconciled, as before. Seeing that it was late at night, the four people happily went home. Chapter 48, Anger level explodes. Alexis did not choose to take the main road. He led a few people to an abandoned house on the hillside outside Hogsmeade. Half of the roof of the house collapsed, and it was filled with rats, spiders, and unknown insects. Claw marks were faintly visible on the dusty floor and mottled walls. Paired with the deep darkness of night, it made the three little guys tremble in fear. Alexis felt nostalgic about this place, so he lifted up the floor to reveal a big hole. This is the secret passage I discovered when I was in school. From here, I can quickly return to Hogwarts without being discovered by others. Alexis said mysteriously, if you want to come out to play in the future, you can go here, but remember to pay attention to safety. After saying that, Alexis jumped up and jumped down the secret passage. This abandoned house means a lot to Alexis. When they were students, after Alexis, James and others discovered Lupin's identity as a werewolf, they did not feel disgusted. Instead, they brought Lupin here every 10th day of the full moon and locked him in the house. Inside, they stayed outside the house, waiting for Lupin to finish. The claw marks on the wall and floor were actually left after Lupin turned into a werewolf. At first, they were scared, fearing that Lupin's commotion here would alert the villagers in Hogsmeade, but later, it became a ghost story for some reason. Legend has it that this place is haunted. Alexis and others followed the trend and continued to confirm the rumors that this place was haunted, eliminating the danger of Lupin's werewolf identity being revealed. James and others spent dozens of full moon nights here. Inside the house were the shrill cries of good friends, and outside the house, they were lying on the grass, looking up at the moon like a jade plate, and telling the boys little troubles. Later, with their graduation, this place was abandoned. This is the first time he has revisited his hometown after many years. However, this love for Hong Kong was quickly interrupted. Alexis, who landed at the bottom, took out his wand and waved it slightly. Fluorescent blink, the tip of the wand lit up, and a big gloomy face appeared in front of him. Alexis was so frightened that he staggered and almost fell to the ground. Snape? Alexis exclaimed in a low voice, calling the person's name. He looked back, stepped forward, and asked in a low voice, what are you here for? Snape snorted and tossed his loose robes. I already know your little secrets. Alexis pouted. He highly suspected that it was because Snape couldn't get into their circle that he started to compete with James for Lily because of love and hatred. Otherwise, how could we explain that Snape knew the secret here? Snort. Professor Snape. Behind him, the three little ones came down with packed desserts. When they saw Snape in front of Alexis, their faces turned green. Harry Potter. Dear Mr. Harry. Harry's green eyes stood out under the fluorescent light, and they seemed to sparkle. This made Snape furious. He rushed towards the three men menacingly, and grabbed Harry's arm. Questioning loudly, it's so late. Shouldn't you be in the Gryffindor common room? Why are you here? Ha. Sure enough, Mr. Potter, you Snape. Alexis spoke up in time to stop Snape from continuing. At this time, the three little ones were trembling with fear, huddled together, and did not dare to speak at all. Alexis's shout made Snape's dizzy mind clear up a little. He took a deep breath, pulled Harry with him, and walked back with a sullen face. Now, come back with me immediately. I'm going to put you in solitary confinement. Since you are so free, go to my office and copy the book, 50 times for each person. Mr. Alexis. Hermione looked anxiously at Alexis. Alexis stepped in front of Snape, took out the forged letter from her arms, and threw it to him. Snape, we came out with Dumbledore's permission. Snape looked at the letter with a strange smile on his face. Ha. Principal Dumbledore's signature. Ha. Snape let go of Harry, which caused Harry to run back and hide among his friends. He approached Alexis and whispered, Alexis Felix, don't think I don't know your little tricks. I've told you before that I know all the little secrets of you bastards. Of course you know that. You also took a forged guardian consent certificate from me. Can you not be clear? Alexis cursed inwardly. Snape, what do you want to do? Alexis took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice. He knew that Snape cared about Harry, and according to Black and the others, Snape had always had a crush on Lily, but he didn't understand why he was so angry. He also sneaked out to play when he was a student. At that time, there was no teacher with him, so wasn't it okay? Now that Harry and the three of them were following him, why was Snape worried? Seeing Alexis' innocent and confused face, Snape's inner anger surged again, quickly breaking through the threshold and about to explode. Alexis, you're such a spoiled bastard. Dumbledore made a mistake hiring you to teach at Hogwarts. You should go back to Nurmengard and die on that damn island with Grindelwald. Boom. Alexis moved her fists and looked at Snape covering his nose gloomily. He turned his head and ordered to the three little ones who were stunned. You three, keep walking along the passage and stop at the shaft. Wait for me there. He pulled out his wand and took out his pocket watch with his other hand and looked at it. 10 minutes. I'll catch up in 10 minutes. Mr. Alexis. Go with. The three little ones just looked at this and that, not daring to say anything more, and quickly held hands and moved towards the edge of the passage. Snape, I've long disliked you. Seeing the three little ones leaving, Alexis flexed his muscles and said loudly, in Hogwarts, I don't want to fight you. But here, look, you're asking for a beating. Snape showed no sign of weakness and drew his wand to confront Alexis. At any time, Alexis, you are a spoiled bastard. You are the one asking for a beating. After saying this, a magic spell was activated and went straight to Alexis' face. Alexis ducked easily, waved her wand, and cast a spell on Snape. Snape dodged nimbly, looked back at the passage where a large piece of it had been blown away, and his expression turned gloomy again. There is no magical restriction here to prohibit disapparition. Snape, I will teach you a lesson. Alexis said confidently. At Hogwarts, due to the prohibition of disembodiment magic, he was not completely sure of winning against Snape. But it was different here. There was no confinement here, and he was confident that Snape was no match for him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49. Everything is under Quirrell's calculations. The facts turned out exactly as Alexis expected. At first, the two were evenly matched and fought back and forth, but as Alexis began to use apparition, Snape's situation became difficult. Although the narrow passage limited Alexis' performance to a certain extent, he was still like a slippery fish, disappearing and disappearing, and Snape's spells could hardly find the target. This feeling was all too familiar to Snape. Everyone who has fought against Alexis, whether it's a sparring match or a life and death fight, once they start to feel inadequate, failure is basically not far away. Harry and the three of them ran to the end of the passage hand in hand. There was a vertical passage nearly 2 meters long. They lay down at the entrance of the cave and looked down, and it was all dark. Hermione put her wand into the hole and took a look. She found that the hole was so winding and rugged that it was impossible to see the bottom. The three of them stopped, not knowing what to do for a moment. Harry pricked up his ears and listened. He could vaguely hear the sound of magic spells hitting the stone wall behind him, which made him a little anxious. One was Snape, who never gave him a good look and was always suspected by them of targeting him, and who didn't look like a good person at first glance. The other was playing with him and was an old friend of his parents. There was no need to think too much about it. Harry was more worried. Of course, Alexis. Why did Snape come here? Ron asked while holding onto the rock wall, mumbling. Hermione was still calm. She retracted her wand, and the fluorescent light on the tip of the wand provided a little light for the three people in the darkness. He's here to deal with Harry, Hermione analyzed categorically. Mr. Alexis took us from the gate. Snape must have seen him. He wanted to attack Harry while Harry was no longer in the school. From the time when Harry and Snape looked at each other at the welcome dinner, the lightning scar on his forehead began to hurt, to later when they made things difficult for Harry over and over again in class. All three of them knew about these things. According to their analysis, Snape has always been ill-intentioned towards Harry, especially the time during the Quidditch flying training lesson when Harry almost fell off his broomstick. They were even more convinced that it was Snape's fault. What should we do? Can Mr. Alexis stop Snape? Ron questioned and leaned forward gropingly. There was a large space at the end of the passage, and Hermione's wand only gave off a faint light, which made Ron in the dark couldn't help but want to get closer. He moved his fingers on the rock wall and touched a fleshy thing. Ron's face turned red. He quickly retracted his hand and subconsciously looked at Hermione and Harry. The two of them looked normal and were discussing whether to rush back to Hogwarts and inform the principal or wait here for Alexis. It's also possible that it was Snape who was waiting. Mr. Alexis said, "Let's wait 10 minutes. We should wait here for a while." Hermione was the first to comment, preferring to believe Alexis. Besides, Mr. Alexis said that there is danger down here and we may not be able to pass. Harry nodded in agreement and both of them looked at Ron. Ron took 2 steps back and placed his palms on the rock wall again. Me. Seeing Hermione looking at him, Ron's face turned even redder, almost catching up with his hair. But soon, Ron's attention shifted to Hermione. He noticed that Hermione had been holding her wand in both hands. What I touched wasn't Hermione's hand. What was it? Ron tilted his head and looked at the rock wall. A soft touch came from the rock wall, causing him to scratch subconsciously. Harry also followed Ron's gaze. With the faint light, the 3 people focused their eyes on Ron's palm. There, he was holding a spider the size of his palm. Ah! Ron let out a scream, retracted his hand as fast as lightning, and swung it back and forth wildly. His whole body suddenly jumped up from the ground, and he hid back tremblingly. Spider, spider, spider. Ah! Ron kept retreating. His feet were empty. He fell into the passage and slid down. Ron, Harry and Hermione were shocked. They lay down at the entrance of the cave and yelled a few words. They could only hear Ron's scream getting farther and farther away, and no other response could be heard at all. Mr. Alexis said there is danger down there. We have to go down. Hermione nodded, agreeing with Harry's decision. The two jumped up and slid down. The small vertical passage was filled with screams. The 3 people turned and twisted along the passage one after another, sliding all the way for an unknown amount of time before finally falling to the ground. Fluorescent flashes. After groping for a long time on the ground, but unable to find his wand, Harry shouted and noticed a light coming from the grass not far away. After picking up his glasses and putting them on and taking back his wand, Harry turned around and helped Ron and Hermione up. It was quiet all around, but the 3 people didn't dare to make a sound. They stood there, carefully looking around and even breathing as lightly as possible. It was still quiet all around. It seems there is no danger at all. After observing for a while, the danger still did not appear, which made the 3 of them relieved. Come on. Let's call the principal and save Mr. Alexis. Hermione whispered and ran towards Hogwarts Castle not far away. They did not see that on the other side, in the deep twilight, a huge and strange shadow was gently swaying its branches, as if it was asleep. Dumbledore leaves Hogwarts. After the 3 Harrys hurried to the principal's office and explained the situation in the passage, Dumbledore left in a hurry. His departure was low-key and did not alert others, but it did not escape the eyes of those who were interested. Quirrell, wearing that ridiculous scarf, hid in a room on the 4th floor and watched Dumbledore leave through the crack in the door. He tiptoed out of the room and came all the way to Luwei. The honest 3-headed dog was sleeping. As Quirrell approached, the tip of its nose began to twitch, as if it was stimulated by the smell of Quirrell's body and would wake up at any time. Quirrell took out a music box, turned the clockwork, and played music. The 3-headed dog Luwei became quiet again and continued to sleep soundly. Quirrell breathed a sigh of relief, stood on tiptoes, pressed against the wall, and slipped into the room. Chapter 50. The mantis stalks the cicada and the oriole follows behind. What is he doing? Watching Quirrell enter the room, the 3 Harrys who had just left the principal's office walked out of the corner of the corridor. Are we going to follow? Harry asked his friends for their opinions. Hermione was still worried about Alexis' safety and was a little distracted, while Ron was still shrouded in the shadow of the spider and was in shock. Obviously, neither of the 2 friends could provide him with effective advice. Harry hesitated, and he quickly thought of what had been rumored a few days ago. Mr. Alexis seemed to have been targeting Professor Quirrell, just like Snape was targeting himself. Let's go and have a look. Harry made a decision. The three people came to Llewellyn cautiously. Llewellyn was so big that, even though he was sleeping on the ground, his height still almost reached the ceiling. "Be careful," Harry whispered, signaling his friends not to wake up the big guy. Just as he was about to enter the room against the wall, the music box beside him stopped at some point. Llewellyn yawned with 3 heads, and his nose wrinkled again. It seemed to smell the scent of a stranger. "It's waking up," Ron said shakily. "No, run away." Harry's expression changed. He turned around, grabbed his friend, and rushed towards the corridor. Roar, woof woof woof, a terrifying scream came from behind, mixed with strong air currents, blowing past. Near midnight, Dumbledore returned to Hogwarts, followed by a disheveled Snape and a cockfighting Alexis. The three of them walked into the principal's office. Dumbledore sat back in his seat and knocked on the table. "Okay, let's tell you what happened. Snape." Dumbledore pointed at Snape. "You speak first." Quirrell said, "This bastard took Harry away. I went after him and met him on the way." "Why are you two fighting?" "Snape, he made the first move." "Alexis, he cursed." "Dumbledore, he cursed and said that I shouldn't be in Hogwarts. He also said that the old man and I should die on that damn island in Nurmengard." Alexis' eyes were red, her face was heartbroken, and she cried out. "He also called me Balabala. In the beginning, it was normal, although it was a bit exaggerated, but fortunately it did not deviate from the actual situation. Later, Alexis's words became more and more exaggerated, and they were completely out of touch with reality, relying entirely on imagination. If Snape really did what he said, then Snape was simply too vicious. Snape has actually always been very restrained. He knew he was in the wrong when he took action in the Shrieking Shack. Now that he has calmed down, he feels a little guilty. But when he heard Alexis making up nonsense and talking endlessly, then the fire surged up again. "So I couldn't get angry, so I took action." Alexis finally finished accusing Snape of evil and turned back to look at Dumbledore helplessly. Dumbledore's mouth twitched. "Here we go again. Here we go again." This is what he does every time he gets into trouble. First he talks nonsense, then takes the opportunity to blame others, and finally looks at himself pitifully. Alex, you've grown so big. How come this X, 2, 3, X routine hasn't changed at all? This is so fake. Okay, you go back first. I will punish Severus alone. Dumbledore waved his hand, just wanting to send this guy away. "Oh." Alexis responded in a noisy voice, walked to the door, turned around and said hypocritically, "Dumbledore, Snape is also worried about Harry's safety, so you can punish him to come to the pharmacy class to clean the classroom for 1 semester. Don't punish them too severely." After saying that, Alexis ignored Snape, who was about to smoke, and left the principal's office humming. Going down to the 4th floor, Alexis stopped. He saw Llewellyn squatting at the door, his 3 heads shaking back and forth, looking around, as if looking for something. "Llewellyn." Alexis walked up to him, and raised his hand to say hello. Llewellyn stuck out his tongue, licked it twice, and continued to look around, looking a little absent-minded. "What happened, Llewellyn?" Alexis asked with a smile, and put the music box on the ground into his pocket. "Did someone go in?" Llewellyn stopped looking around, and 3 big heads approached Alexis. It seemed to be hesitant, staring at Alexis with its 6 eyes for a while, and the head in the middle swayed slightly from side to side twice. However, the confused look in Llewellyn's eyes did not escape Alexis's eyes. "Isn't it certain that no one has entered?" Alexis thought so, played with Llewellyn for a while, then turned and left. Back in the office, he took out the music box and looked at it carefully. Could it be that the intruder used this thing to hypnotize Llewellyn? Will people be hypnotized after listening to it? After struggling for a moment, Alexis twisted the clockwork, placed the music box on the table, and pulled out the wand, with a look on his face, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Let go of the hand holding the clockwork. The melodious music sounded, the music box was opened, and the 2 little people danced along with the music. Alexis was concentrating, her spirits were high, her muscles were tense, and the arm holding the wand was shaking slightly. The music continues. The 2 villains flew up and down, and performed various difficult movements. Their dancing skills were close to the international level. Alexis swallowed, not daring to be careless, and continued to swing her arms rhythmically. The song ended, the two little figures took their bows, and the music box lid closed. Alexis swallowed. What a powerful hypnosis. He put away his wand and pocketed the music box. It is useless to people. It has no other effect, except making people unable to help, but want to sway to the beat. This should be used by people entering the room to hypnotize Lu Wei. Gryffindor Lounge. It was already midnight. The energetic little lions were already snoring. 3 sneaky figures gathered in the common room. Hermione, why are you here too? Ron asked in surprise. Hermione snorted, looked around, and said softly, I have to watch you, and I can't let you violate school rules again. But sneaking out in the middle of the night is against school rules. Hermione glared at the talkative Ron, her eyes fixed on Harry's hand, looking at it curiously. Is this the invisibility cloak you were talking about? Note 1. Well, after I entered school, I don't know who put it on my bed. Harry nodded, unfolded the invisibility cloak, and draped it around the 3 of them, who immediately disappeared into the common room. Let's go. With this, we can fool that big guy. The 3 people sneaked out of the Gryffindor common room and headed towards the 4th floor of the main building. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.